So, okay, friends, very good noon to you all, and welcome to this DISA refresher course, which is based on the old course, which is DISA 2. I am CA MS Mehta, practicing chartered accountant, DISA, CISA, CDPSC, and faculty for this module 1 and 2. Now, this course is a refresher course for 3 days, where different faculties would be taking you through a quick, I'll say recap on all these different modules we have. So I'll be taking module 1 and 2. Now, the whole idea behind this course is that it should act as a very quick reference and refresher for those who have already gone through the course. And honestly, for those who have not yet started the preparation, it could be a good, I'll say, preview or foundation based on which you could go further and develop on the whole things. So that is the idea behind this course, which would be for 3 days. Now, since it's a refresher course, we'll be going at a bit fast pace. My request to each one of you is keep a notebook with you and just note down the concepts. I'll be harping more on the concepts because if your concepts are strong, your foundations are strong, you can easily build an edifice on that. So most important thing is the concepts. So I'll be harping more on the concepts. I'll be going, as I said, a bit fast so that we could cover module 1 in approximately 1 hour. Module 2 would be covered in another 1 hour. So 2 hours I'll be taking of this session. After me, we'll have Mr. Gandhi, who will be taking module 3 and onwards. So that is the whole, I'll say, schedule for these 3 days. Different faculties would be taking you through different modules. Now, let me start by sharing my screen. So I believe my screen would be visible to you. Jay, is it visible? Okay, great. Great, thank you. So, okay, friends, the whole this DISA 2 course, which is the old syllabus, because now we have got running DISA 3, which is the latest one which is happening. But this whole slides and everything is based on DISA 2. And I'll be starting with module 1. Now, module 1 is a primer to information systems. So it's a kind of, I'll say, the very basics which are required, which you need to understand to build on the information system course. Now, this whole course has been into e-learning also, and many of you might have gone through e-learning. But let me tell you that e-learning is very, very critical because that is the foundation on which the whole course is built. So it's essential to understand the basic concepts. Now, just try to imagine that you have gone to a bank and you want to print some kind of a report out of their ERP systems. Let's say they got Finacle or banks or whatever. Now, for doing this, what you need to do is, let's say you want a report on the on some ledger account. So Finacle has got something, a menu option, which is called ACLI. With the ACLI, you could get any kind of a ledger account. Now, what do? You open the Finacle, and in the browser, wherever the application is there, you feed in ACLI. But the issue is, does your system understand what is ACLI? No, because your system is based on zeros and ones. So what happens is you have a keyboard where you key in ACLI. Keyboard in turns converts them into something like some kind of a binary code, which is entered to the system. Now, system understands that the user wants an account statement. Now, it now interacts with what? The application system, which is there through some kind of operating systems. Now, this application system, which in this case is Finacle, it sends an instruction across the cables, across routers, across bridges, and gateways onto the application server at the back end of the bank. And in the data center, this application server now understands that the user wants a account statement. Now it now talks to the database server, which is at the back end. And from backend, the database server needs the information relating to that account. So it goes to the various storages which are there. So it could be a SAN or a NAS. SAN is storage area networks, NAS is network attached storages. So it could go to a NAS or a SAN, pick up the information you want, and the journey starts back. So on to database server to app server to your system now. But and the report is to be printed. But the issue is the printer doesn't understand that language in which it comes, so it has to be somehow converted into the language which it is understandable by the printer, which is done through something called uh, as drivers. So drivers do what? They make the printer run and they help it understand what is to be done, and ultimately whatever report has come goes to printer and the report is printed. So just try to understand, in a simple act like printing a report, so much of different layers of information systems are involved. So you have interacted with the operating system layer, you have interacted with the hardware layer, you have interacted with the application layer, you have interacted with the database layer. So many different layers are involved in a single transaction of printing a report out of your in any bank. Now, this whole technology is playing parts at different layers of technology. So let's try to understand some bits and pieces of it so that we can understand what is the technology that goes behind and how it helps the information systems. So information systems is a complex of hardware, software, data which is there, utilities which are there, the infrastructure which is there, and the various rules and procedures through which it interacts among each other. So starting with the module, if we look at it, the hardware side of it, your hardware, if you look, this is a simple, schematic diagram of your hardware. So you got some input devices which help you interact with the system, then some processing takes place, and you got some output devices through which the system responds. Now, within this CPU, you got broadly what I'll say is three components. One is a control unit, other is arithmetic logic unit, and the third is memory. Now, control unit controls, right? So it gives instructions to arithmetic logic unit to do some arithmetic and logical calculations. So ALU's job is to do some arithmetic and logic calculations. Okay, and this in turn interacts with the registers. Registers are the memory within your CPU. Now, registers are the smallest memory, they are the fastest memory. Okay, so note that down. Sometimes you could get questions based on that, right? So registers is the smallest memory which is located in your CPU. It is the fastest memory. Because if you look at the speed of your CPUs, your ALUs are working at the speed of MIPS. MIPS is millions of instructions per second, or probably now trillions of instructions per second. Now, these kind of instructions need what? They need that your memory needs to read and write millions of times in 1 second. Now, for that, what you need is a very, very fast memory, which is indeed expensive. See, if you look at it, the computers have done a brilliant job of optimization. So you got your your registers, which is memory located in your CPU, which is very small and very, very fast. Okay, which in turn everything which is to be written from ALU is written on memory. Everything which is has to be read again is done by registers. Now, because it's a very, very fast memory, it's a very, very small memory. So typically, many times you must have heard the concept of 32-bit or 64-bit. Now, 32-bit is the typical size of the memory of your register, right? So when you talk of 32-bit computers, what it means is that the register size is the 32 bits at a time. It can handle 32 bits. And when you talk of 64-bit, then it is 64 bits. I believe the largest size till date is something like 28 bits for the register. So it's a very, very small but very, very fast memory, because it has to do millions of what I'll say is refresh in 1 second. Now, control unit is more like a CA in his office. He has to, control everybody. He has to give instructions to all the people in the office to work. And ultimate work is done by ALU, okay, which interacts with memory. Now, there are various levels of memory in your system, right from registers, which is the fastest and the smallest memory, to cache memory, to primary memory, to secondary memory. Okay, so things keep on moving amongst all these memories. So let me give you a quick review of the whole thing. So the job of hardware is to cater to the desire of users and give results. So we got register, which is the smallest and the fastest memory, which in turn interacts with something like a RAM, which could be a primary memory, which in turn interacts with your secondary memory, which could be a hard disk, which could be an SSD today. Now, a register is a very fast and very small memory, whereas primary memory is much, much slower as compared to register. Now, the point is, if there is one side, there is a very fast memory, the other side, there is a very slow memory, and these have to interact. Now, to bridge the speed differences, we got the concept of cache memory. Now, cache memory does what? Whatever is being transferred from primary to register, a copy is being held in the cache memory. So next time, whenever a register wants something, first it goes to cache. If it finds it, fine. Otherwise, it goes to the RAM or the primary memory. So point is, it bridges the speed differences between register and the primary memory, which in this case would be the RAM. Now, this cache would be at different levels. Part of it is situated in CPU, which is called level one cache or L1 cache, and you could also have L2 cache, which is situated uh, on the motherboard. Now, even L3 caches are there. So, different level of caches are there. But primary memory has got a limitation. Let's say you got a RAM which is only 1 GB. Now, the maximum data it can hold is how much? Again, 1 GB. And in RAM, what you have is you have application systems, you have operating systems, you got data to be crunched. Now, if you think that already, let's say, 800 MB has been consumed and you want to launch a new program which would load something like 400 memory, then what will primary memory do? So there is a concept of virtual memories. So out of the secondary memory, some memory is carved which behaves like primary memory. It's in fact the secondary memory which behaves like primary memory. That's why it's called a virtual memory. So primary memory sends some data to virtual memory, frees itself, and the thing solves. So this whole thing, keeps on doing. So that is the memory hierarchy. A lot of time you get questions on that. The fastest memory, the smallest memory, what is the role of cache memory? So these are some concepts which you need to know for your exams. Then, friends, important is hardware asset management. Now, hardware has got a complete life cycle. You need policies for acquiring hardware. Then, hardware also needs to be maintained because there has been a survey on Fortune 500 companies which said that around 7 to 8% is the IT spend of companies. So, if this is the kind of IT spend, it needs to be managed, and what you need is hardware management. So hardware, you could also have hardware maintenance is required, hardware monitoring is required, and you also need data and capacity management. Data and capacity management is uh, to use the existing capacities efficiently and effectively. So that is the basic objective behind data and capacity management. Then after the life is over, at an appropriate time, you also need to retire the hardware. So for that also you need some kind of a plan. See, friends, the sad part is most of the organizations have got plans which are there for acquisition, for maintenance. But if you look at it, destruction or retirement is probably not practiced, but it is equally important because your data is lying there. So hardware asset management is all about the whole life cycle from acquisition to retirement of the hardware. Then the second part which interacts with the hardware, because hardware is a piece of junk, right? So if the hardware has to become like functional, what you need is operating system. Now, operating system does a lot of things. Operating system gives you processor management because your whole processor is being managed by operating system. Which application, how much processor capacity to give, all these things are decided by your processor management. Then carving out virtual memories, giving memories to various applications, to various files, all that is again memory management is being done by your operating system. Device management, okay, is again done by your operating system. Just try to think of it. I think so many of you would have at one time or other maybe used something like Windows XP. So at time of Windows XP, so whenever you used to insert a pen drive, What did the system say? They said, I need a driver, but no longer. Now you just plug and play, because the device management, the driver management is also being done by your operating system. Then again, file management is again done by your operating system. Carving out virtual memories out of secondary memory and all is again done by your operating system. DOS days, you couldn't network. Okay, but today with Windows, with Unix, with Linux, you can network. So the network capabilities are again being provided to you by the operating systems. So if you look at operating systems, let's say somebody is good with programming and he wants to make an ERP for chartered accountants, but his challenge would be each of the system, many of the system would have different configurations, different processors, different RAMs. So how to handle it at the application level? So operating system provides you with application program interfaces, so that application developer doesn't have to bother about the hardware. He only has to bother about the OS. So application now interfaces with through APIs with operating system. Operating system in turns takes care of how to handle different kind of processors, different kind of RAMs and other equipments, right? So basically what you get is kind of hardware independence. Okay. So operating system gives you kind of hardware independence to the applications which are interacting with it. Then the way you interface, whether it's a command line interface or it's a graphic user interface, is all decided by the operating systems. Now, these are some of the core tasks which happen with operating systems. Now, if you look at it, where is operating system situated? OS on one side, what you got is hardware. Other side, what you have is applications and users. The part of operating system which interacts with the hardware is called the kernel of the operating system, the core of the operating system. And the outside portion which interacts with applications is called the shell of the operating system. Now, operating system is something which makes your whole system work. Okay, your hardware is kind of a piece of junk, I'll say, without operating system. Okay, philosophically speaking, operating system is the soul, and hardware is the body. Okay, only when the two combine, then the whole thing works. So very important is again software asset management. The software asset management covers purchasing of softwares or deploying softwares, managing the softwares and tracking softwares. So it's basically about right from purchase to the retirement of software, the whole life cycle form part of software asset management. Now, for any organization, softwares are a very critical asset which need to be managed. So you need to know what are the softwares deployed, what are the licensing for that, and these are the kind of, I'll say, consulting services which even a chartered accountant can give. He could manage the asset register for a client. Okay. He could manage the various licenses and apprise him of the risk which could be there, or reputational risk which could be there if he has some kind of unlicensed software. So these are the even kind of consulting things you could go for. Okay. Next, friends, we talk of database management systems. Now, database management systems are used to organize data. So these are softwares that aid in organizing, controlling, using the data which is needed by the application programs. See, earlier data was part of the applications, but then a time came when data became large. So there was a de-link, I'll say, between applications and database and the data which is now in DBMS. So applications call for data through DBMS and provide you with whatever information you require. Now, when I talk of database management systems, the most prominent model we have today is something called as RDBMS, Relational Database Model. Now, relational database model consists of various tables. Okay. These tables could have some rows or records, which are called tuples. The technical word is tuple for that, right? And each of these record would have some columns or some attributes. Okay. Or could also sometimes you call them fields. Okay. Various fields. So each of these record would have some attributes which are represented by different columns or different fields. Now, each of this table would have one column which uniquely identifies all the records. This is called the primary key. Okay, this is called the primary key. Primary key, because it has to uniquely identify every record, is always unique, never a null. Okay, if you just try to think of it, of your institute's membership database, then if you think of your institute's membership database, then what is the primary key? Of course, it is your membership number. Membership number, which is always unique, never a null. No two members can have the same same membership number, and at the same time, till you have the membership number, you are not a member, right? So if you look at that, then primary key is always unique, never a null. Now just try thinking of it. We got, let's say we have a table which is a customer table in a bank. So customer table in a bank, the primary key would be what? uh, uh, the cust id. The cust id would be the primary key for the customer table. Now banking software has got another table which is account table, for which the primary key would be the account number. Now, but at the same time, account table has got one more column, which is again the customer ID or the cust ID, because every account is related to some or the other customer of the bank. So it will have one more column, which is the cust ID. Now, this cust ID is the primary key in the other table, which is the customer table. So here it is called a foreign key. So wherever a key is referred to primary key in other table, so here it's called a foreign key. You could very simplistically think of primary key at a foreign location. Okay, so primary key at a foreign location, it would be the foreign key. Okay, now when you talk of database, there are various controls which are applicable. Okay, now some of these controls which are used, one is called a domain integrity constraint. Domain integrity constraint says uh, wherever there's a table, all the values in one field should be from the same domain. Okay, all the values in one field should be from the same domain. Domain, you could very simplistically think of a type. What is the type of data which is residing there? Now, for example, if we take a simple example, again continuing the same example of the membership database of the institute, then the membership data would have one column which is age of a member. So if you try to think what would be the type of data that would be residing in this column, in the age, the type of data which would be residing is the numeric data. Okay, it is a numeric data with a constraint that it should be 21 or more, right? So if you think of the domain for this column, it would be numeric, which is 21 or more. So the domain integrity constraint says that in one column, let's taking this example as age column, the only values which can come would be numeric, which are 21 or more. Similarly, there's another concept which is entity integrity constraint. Entity integrity says that there'll be a primary key value which will always be unique, never a null. Okay, so please note down these concepts, because sometimes question could come like, what is a domain integrity constraint or what is an entity integrity constraint? So these are the concepts which you need to know. So I believe you all have a notebook and you are noting down the major concepts. So entity integrity constraint says that there'll be a primary key value which will always be unique, never a null. Okay. Again, taking the example of the institute, the primary key would be the membership number. Okay. Or if you think of an SSC database, then the primary key would be the PAN number, which is always unique, never a null. Okay. Then there is a concept of referential integrity. Now, referential integrity says foreign key in one table must match primary key of another table or be null. So what this concept says is that wherever there is a foreign key, the value should be there as a primary key in the other table or can be null. Okay. Continuing the example we discussed earlier, let's say in a bank, there is a table of customer table whose primary key is cust ID. Then we got an account table whose primary key is account number. And in that table, there is a foreign key which is cust ID. And what this concept says is if you're creating an account where in the cust ID you put the value as 100, then 100 number customer should be there in the in the cust table. Okay, so in the customer table, there should be a value 100. Only then, it can be referenced here. So referential integrity ensures that the data which are referenced somewhere, okay, that value exists. But yes, or it can be null also. See, the foreign key can be null also. But if you put a value, that value should be there in the primary key. Okay, so these are very important concepts as far as relational databases are concerned. Then there is one question which many times come in the exam, which is based on DBA. Okay, DBA is database administrator. Okay, who manages all these databases for an organization. But whenever large organizations are there, we got a concept of DA also. DA is data administrator. So we got now two functions. One is DA, data administrator. Other is database administrator. So data administrator is more involved with what you could say is the admin kind of things, whereas database administrator is more involved with the technical side of it. Okay, so data administrator is more about what I'll say is the designing and the policies part of it, and DBA is more about how they are implemented. So a simple thing to understand and keep in mind whenever you're answering these questions is, whatever the activity is it being done outside the system or is it being done inside the system? So whatever is being done outside of the system is normally the job of DA. Whatever is being done inside the machines is the job of the DBA. Now, for example, I think so you would have understood about the schemas, the various schemas. So if you just think of it, the user schema or the user's view of data, it is outside the machine. So it is being handled by the DA. Conceptual schema or the logical structure of your databases are again being handled by the data administrators. Whereas if you look at internal schema or physical schema, it is being handled inside the machine. So would be the job of a DBA. So the only thing you need to think about when these kind of questions come is it being done outside the machine or is it being done inside the machine? Okay, so the schemas. Let me talk a bit about schemas because sometimes you get questions on that also. Now, schemas, friends, come from the word schematics. Schematics means a structure. So in database, what you'll find is there are three kind of schemas. First is the user schema or external schema. User or external schema is user's view of database. What user needs in terms of data. So that is user's view of database. Then comes the conceptual schema. Now, conceptual schema is the logical structure of the database. Okay, so it's the overall logical structure of the database. For example, you could have employee ID, which is 10 numeric. You could have employee name, which is text 30. You could have date of joining DD YYYY. Right, so this way it represents the whole logical structure of your database, which is the conceptual schema. And this whole thing is now translated inside your machine. Somewhere in your storage devices, the whole thing is there. Now, this is called internal schema. How it is physically stored in your machines, that is your internal schema. So schema concepts are again, you need to know because often you get questions on that. Okay. Then friends, what is important is the configuration management. Okay. See, everything in a system, be it hardware, be it software, be it services, all of them need some kind of configuration. So whatever needs configuration are called configuration items. Okay, these are called configuration items which need configuration. And to manage these items, the system is used, which is called a CMDB, configuration management database. To manage configuration, what you got is for various IS components, you got a CMDB, which is configuration management database. So first is you identify what needs configuration. Once that is identified, then you have configuration control. Through configuration control, you decide what are the configurations which are desired for all these configuration items. Okay, so after that the configuration is done, and what we have is configuration status reporting. Configuration status reporting is more about documentation of configuration of different configuration items. Okay, so you could say it's more like a record of what are the configuration of different items. Okay, then comes the configuration audit. Configuration audit determines that whatever the as per configuration control, whatever configurations were desired, is it actually there or not? So all this thing is again done through many applications which are there, because configuration management becomes very, very critical for any organization. And even, if you try to think of at the central level, they also need to know what are the configurations of different configuration items, even in their remote offices. Okay, like there could be configurations for password. What is the length of a password? Okay, or what is the period of change of a password? So all these need some kind of a configuration. Okay, so all this is done through some kind of configuration management. Okay, just to give you a very simple example, this is one of the softwares which helps manage the which helps in the configuration management. Now, this is the CMDB. CMDB is the configuration management database. Okay, so what it is doing, it is managing various configuration items. Configurations items, as I said, is all the items which could require configuration. Now, that could be access point, that could be business service, a cluster, a data center, department, or even a document. Even firewalls, need some kind of configuration. Keyboard could have its own configuration. Is it the US type or is the UK type, right? So different configurations could be there. So configuration items, the whole management is done through some kind of softwares which help in managing these configurations. Then, friends, when you talk of networks, okay, when you talk of networks, it's more about systems which are connected, which could be connected through some kind of a medium through which data can be exchanged. So that could be a LAN, that could be a WAN, that could be again through Wi-Fi, through cables, through Bluetooth, so many new technologies which are coming in. So when you talk of computer network, it's a group of devices which are connected to each other. Now, one kind there's a concept called switching. Switching is basically a transfer. Switching is a transfer which transfers something to another. Okay, so where from sender to receiver some data is being transferred, that process is called switching. Now, there could be different kind of switching. So this also, we sometimes get question. Okay, so first concept is of circuit switching. Now, circuit switching is like your old landlines or your mobile phones today. Circuit switching is first the circuit is built, means from A to B a connection is created, only then the data travels. Like for example, if you're trying to call somebody on mobile, only when the other person has agreed and the connection has been established, only then you can speak, right? So data gets transferred only when the circuit is complete. The other kind of switching is packet switching, where data is broken down into different packets and they could go along different paths and ultimately assemble at the endpoint. For example, your internet, any kind of internet generates a lot of different packets which could be going through different routes even. Okay, at the ultimately they are connected. So this kind of transfer is called packet switching. So packet switching is where data is factored into various packets and they collect at the endpoint. Then you have got message switching. The message switching is where data is sent irrespective of whether connection has been established or not. So it waits at some point, and whenever the connection is there, it goes forward. So it's more of a like waiting and then going forward. A simple example could be your SMS. You send an SMS, okay, that goes from your end. Okay, but the other person, if he's not connected, still your message goes and is waiting at some point. As soon as the other person connects, so the message gets transferred. Okay, so this is called message switching. Okay, so this is one concept on which you sometimes get some questions. Then, friends, one very, very important thing which you need to study is the layer concepts. Okay, so right now we got two things. One is OSI layers. Okay, OSI is a model. OSI is a model which is used to understand how data travels across networks. But let me tell you, OSI is more of a theoretical model. It's a reference model. OSI was proposed by ISO, and it has got 7 layers. So these 7 layers explain how data gets transferred from one end to another. But the practically implemented model we have is called TCP/IP model. TCP/IP is the practical model which has been implemented, whereas OSI is more from the understanding point of view how data gets transferred. So TCP/IP is a 5-layered model. So here you got 5 layers starting from physical layer to network layer to internet network layer. then to transport layer, and ultimately the application layer. So each of these layers, you could call them phases also. You could call them phases of communication also. Okay. So each of these layers do some specific tasks. Okay. Now, for example, physical layer is represents the physical characteristics of the network. Okay. For example, your fiber optics, your cat cables. So all these come where at the physical layer. That is how data is physically transferred. Okay, because data could be traveling in the form of light pulses across fiber optics, or it could be traveling in the form of some currents, in some kind of copper based cables. So physical represents the physical characteristics of the network. Then you got network access or data link layer. So network access or data link layer, this determines the routines for accessing the physical network. So try to think of it. Your data is what? It is in the form of zeros and ones. Okay, but the physical layer is sending it in the form of some maybe light pulses or maybe some kind of currents. So you need something which can translate those zeros and ones into some kind of electrical pulses or some kind of light pulses which goes across the fiber networks. Okay, now this is all handled at the layer which is called data link layer or the network access layer. Then, friends, once your data is in different packets, it needed to be routed. Okay, it's need to be sent across what I'll say is different routes. So something has to be done about it, which route it adopts. Okay, now this is all handled by the inter-network layer or network layer, which contains various protocols which are used for going across the whole routes. Okay, it is just similar to, let's say, uh, you want to go to, let's say, Mumbai from Delhi. So you go to railway station and you ask him, I want to go to Delhi. Sorry, I want to go to Mumbai. Now he could suggest you different routes. Okay, based on what? Based on the timetable which is there. He could tell this is a train which goes to Ahmedabad, and from Ahmedabad there is a train to Mumbai. You catch that train, or there's a direct train. So different routes you could see across which you could go. Same way, your router has got something called as routing tables. So these routing tables determine which path you'll be taking for reaching the endpoint. Okay. Then you got transport layer. Transport layer determines the end-to-end data delivery of services. So this is more concerned with how the data is delivered from one end to another end. So these are protocols like TCP, like UDP. All these are protocols which are at the transport layer. Now, TCP has got a, what I'll say is kind of more secure communication. Secure in the sense that whenever a TCP packet goes, you get an acknowledgement that yes, that packet has been received. So it is ensured that yes, transmission has happened, the transport has happened. So this ensures what is a kind of, or you could have, UDP. UDP is a user datagram protocol. Now, UDP is more of a kind of a broadcast. We have sent it, whether received or not, right? So for each of the packets, the acknowledgement doesn't come, right? But only at the end of it, if it is not received, so that sends it that this packet has not been received, which is sent again, right? But at the same time, UDP needs lesser bandwidth. It needs lesser resources. So wherever you need lesser resources, you go in for UDP. But wherever you need, yes, this thing has to go, then you'll be using TCP. Then we got application layer. So application layer has got all the applications and processes that use the network. Ultimately, how does it interact, right? So web services, okay, web services, SMTP services. So let's say you want to go to your browser and you want to look at something. So what happens is HTTP. HTTP is a protocol which works, for the web services, or SMTP, which works for the mail services. So all these protocols are at the application layer. So TCP layer basically helps you, go from one end to another. Like for example, if you are putting anything in your browser, what happens is your browser is at the application layer. Okay, so HTTP transmission will start, probably converted into TCP packets. TCP packets then decide where it is to go, and again, TCP packet is converted into, the data is converted into, let's say, electrical pulses. And at the physical level, this fiber optics send the data, and there, the whole thing starts back. So again, the electrical pulses to zeros and ones to packets determining where it is to go. then again, the acknowledgement or whatever of that, and then at the end, at the other end also the data is get. So this is how the data gets travels from one end to another through various layers. The layer concept is important. Please go through that. Okay, you could go through OSI layers as well as TCP/IP layer, because questions often get asked on this area. Then friends, the concept of addresses. Okay, the concept of address is where something has to reach. Address is something where something has to reach. Okay, so it basically represents a location. So if you look at that, broadly for an address, most of the addresses have got what I'll say is two components: a generic component and a unique component. Now, for example, I take one civil lines, two civil lines, three civil lines, four civil lines, five civil lines. So these are what addresses. But if you look at this address, it's got a generic component, which is the civil lines. Okay, and it's got a unique component, which is building 1, building 2, building 3, building 4, building 5, right? So the address is composed of two things. One is area's address or the generic component. Other is a specific or a unique portion which represents a building. Okay. Now, similarly, if you just try to correlate with your addresses, right? So your addresses are 192.168.0.1, 192.168.0.2, 192.168.0.3. So if you look at this address, your IP address, it also consists of two portions. One is 192.168.0, which is the network ID, which is the network portion of the address. And host 1, host 2, host 3. This is what the host ID or the host portion of the address is. Okay, so broadly, if you try to understand, address represents a location. Okay, now this could be in your system. If you think of it, it could be at two different levels. Okay, one is called a physical address. Physical address is which is hard coded in your machine. Okay, which is hard coded in your machine. Now this is in your case would be the MAC address. This in your case would be the MAC address. Now, MAC address is a 48-bit hard-coded address, which is hard-coded on the network interface card. Okay, so try to think of it. If I have to go outside this room where I'm sitting, what I need is I need a door. Okay, similarly, whenever your data has to go outside your machine, what it needs is again a door. Now, the door could lead to a LAN. That door could lead to be through some kind of a Wi-Fi. That door could be some kind of a Bluetooth. So you could have different ways to go out, right? You could have different doors to go out. And this door of your machine is called the network interface card. Okay, so it is called the network interface card. If you need to go from LAN, it is called a LAN card. If you want to go through Wi-Fi, it's called a Wi-Fi card. If you want to go through Bluetooth, it would be a Bluetooth card. Now, each of this has got a hard-coded 48-bit address, which doesn't change unless and otherwise you change the network interface card. So it doesn't change. Okay, it is hard-coded on your machine. If your machine has got, let's say, Bluetooth as well as Wi-Fi as well as a LAN, then it will be having 3 network interface cards. And each of these network interface cards would have a unique MAC address. One thing important to understand is each of the network interface card across the world has got a unique 48-bit address. Okay, so if ever you want to check your addresses, you could go to command prompt and put ipconfig/all. Now, the second kind of address you have is IP addresses. IP addresses are addresses given by Internet Protocol. Okay. Now, these IP addresses are configurable addresses. So they could change from place to place. If whenever you're in a different network, you could have a different IP addresses. Okay. Now, IP addresses identify machines on the network. Our traditional IP scheme is a 32-bit address. So if it's a 32-bit address, how many addresses can you have? It is 2 to the power 32. So that is the maximum number of addresses you could have. And now, friends, if you look at it, IP is needed at every endpoint on the internet, because your whole internet is based on what? It is based on TCP/IP. So the endpoints are represented by some kind of an IP address. So on internet, wherever there's an endpoint, there has to be an IP address. Okay. Now this could be, let's say, your IP webcam. Your IP webcam has its own IP address. Your IoT devices would have their own IP addresses. And tomorrow, let's say you got a Tesla or a Google car, it would have its own IP addresses, right? So every endpoint is represented by IP addresses. That is why the demand for IP address has increased a lot. So we are moving from IP version 4 to IP version 6, IPv6 as it is called. Now, IPv6 is a 128-bit addressing scheme, which means a huge number of IP addresses are available now. Now, if you look at the traditional IP addressing scheme, it has got 32 bits, where each of these 8 bits is separated by a dot, which is represented by an octet. Okay, so each of these octet could be 0 to 255. Okay, so what you have is different classes of addresses. So go through classes of addresses, because many times you get questions on that. You got class A address, class B address, class C address, class D address, and class E address. Class A is one is network, three are host. Class B is two octets are network, two are host. Class C address is three are networks and one is host, so on and so forth, right? So point is about IP addresses also you need to know broadly. There are two kind of IP addresses: static IP addresses which don't change, and dynamic IP addresses which change. Okay. Now, you go to an endpoint using an IP address, but ultimately you have to go to some service, right? You got to go to some, let's say, what is the kind of service you want? Should that packet go to email, or should that packet go to FTP, or should that packet go to your browser, okay, or web services? This is all decided by something called as ports. So these are logical ports or network ports. Okay, so network port is again a 16-bit number, which is attached to every communication which goes. Okay, so 0 to 1023, please note it down. 0 to 1023 are well-defined ports, because you sometimes get questions on that, right? So 0 to 1023 are well-known ports, okay, which are defined in your system. Okay, for example, FTP is port 80, Telnet is port 30, SMTP is port 25, HTTP is port 80, HTTPS is port 443. So all these are well-defined ports. This is where these services are hosted. So whenever you are joining any, you're doing, going to some website, so you are going to port 80 or port 443, depending on whether it is HTTPS communication or it is HTTP communication. Similarly, whenever you're FTPing, then what you got is port 20. So these are some well-known ports. So the total number of ports, if you look at one machine, is 65,536, because 16 bits means 2 to the power 16, that is 65,536. Friends, port comes from the French word pote. Pote means a door in French. So basically, these are logical doors to your machine. So each of the machine has got something like 65,536 doors to protect. I think so you can understand what security means. Now, whenever you are connected, whenever a packet goes, your packet header has got 5 things within that. So each of the packet has got your local IP address, your local port, the remote IP address, remote port, and the protocol. So these 5 things form part of your header: the protocol, the local IP address, local port, outside IP address, outside port. So these form your header. Okay. Domain name system is the alphabetic representation of the various of the IP addresses, right? So because if you want to, let's say, connect to ICI.org, now ICI.org, let's say the IP address is 76.33.44.190 something, right? So you won't remember that address always, but you will remember ICI.org. So the system is, you got a domain name. Domain name is alphabetic representation of the site. But for connecting, what you need to do is you need to resolve or translate that domain name into some kind of an IP address. So this is done through domain name services. So domain name system helps you convert that alphabetic representation into some kind of a IP address to which your system connects. Okay, so DNS resolves domain names to IP addresses. Now, firewalls are a combination of hardware which are used to prevent any data from coming in or any data from going out. So they got ingress rules as well as egress rules. So inside as well as outside. Okay. Now firewalls could be different kinds. They could be network. There could be kind of network firewalls. So network firewalls are built on whole of the network, right? Then you could have host based firewalls which are present on every host. Then you got personal firewall like your Windows firewall. That's a personal firewall, right? Now, the different ways of firewalling could be could have packet filtering, you could have stateful inspection firewalls, you could have application level firewalls, you could have circuit level firewalls. So different kind of firewalls could be there, but the most prominent one is packet filtering firewall. Okay, so packet filtering firewall works on the headers of the packet. On headers, what we discussed already was there are five things. We got a protocol, we got inside IP address, inside port, outside IP address, outside port. So five things comprise your headers. Now, based on the headers, based on each of these five factors, you could build a rule. You could build a rule to permit or to deny. So rules are broadly two kinds: permit or deny. Okay. Now, for example, you could build a rule wherever the protocol is TCP, source address is any address, destination address is this specific IP address, source port is more than 12023. More than 1023 are private ports or registered ports. Okay. Our destination address is port 80. Port 80 we already discussed is port HTTP. So whenever it is HTTP, permit. What it means is if the packet contains these kind of things in their header, then allow entry. Similarly, if the protocol is UDP, source is any, destination address is this one, any private coming from any private port to port 53, permit. Okay, or TCP from this specific address to this specific address, okay, permit. And rest of it, deny. So what it is, rules could be two kinds: permit some, deny all. Okay, or deny some, permit all. A good security is permit some, deny all. So here you have built a rule. If these four conditions are satisfied, permit, otherwise deny. So this is how you could build packet filtering routers or packet filtering firewalls. Now, friends, firewalls only protect from outside, but many of the attacks are inside attacks. So there, what we got is intrusion detection systems. So intrusion detection system is broadly two kinds: NIDS, HIDS. NIDS is applicable on whole of the network, okay, and HIDS on each of the hosts. Okay, NIDS has got a limitation that it cannot look at encrypted traffic. If the traffic is encrypted, so NIDS can't look at the traffic. Okay, so for that, what we need is HIDS. But HIDS you need on every host, so these are expensive solutions. Okay, they were difficult to maintain. Then, friends, a very important topic is cryptography. Now, cryptography is converting something which is clear text to ciphertext. Okay, so the practice of study of hiding information, okay, where you convert something which is readable and understandable to something which may be readable, not understandable, is the process of encryption, and the reverse is decryption. Okay, now there are broadly three kinds of encryptions. One is symmetric key encryption, other is asymmetric key encryption, and the third one is message digest or hash. Okay. Now, symmetric key encryption is where you convert plain text into ciphertext using a symmetric key algorithm. Okay, where you use the same key. Let me explain it with a simple example, I think, so you can understand the concept better, I believe. Okay. Now, this is something which is readable but not understandable. What does it mean? ETJB, it doesn't mean anything, right? But if I say that this is DSA, okay, this is DSA. Now, this becomes something which is readable as well as understandable. Now, this is, friends, called the clear text. This is called the ciphertext. Ciphertext means which is readable, not understandable. And to convert this to this, we could be using some kind of a formula or a function. Like I've used a very simple function, which is original letter plus 1 is equal to encrypted letter. That is, I have just displaced each of these characters by one place. Okay. Now, this kind of a encryption is called a substitution cipher. Okay, and has been used, since centuries altogether. Okay, even in the time of Julius Caesar, this kind of encryption was used. So where you displace, every character by a specified number of, places, right? So I've used a very simple formula, which is original letter plus 1 is equal to encrypt letter. This formula or function which you use for encryption or decryption in techies language, this is called algorithm. So algorithm is the formula or function which is used for encryption or decryption, right? Now, if you just look at this formula has got original letter plus 1 is equal to encrypted letter. Means this formula operates with one factor 1. If I convert 1 to 2, the encrypted letter will change. If I convert 2 to 3, again encrypted letter will change. Now this factor which is used to run the algorithm in techies language, this is called the key. Okay, this is the key. This is the key to the algorithm. This is key to the algorithm. Okay, so if I change 1 to 2, it will change. 2 to 3, encryption will change. Okay, now the process of converting encrypted text or ciphertext to clear text, this is the process of decryption. Now let me continue the same example. The process of decryption would be original letter is equal to encrypted letter minus a key. Okay, it would be encrypted letter minus a key. Okay, so if I send a message to somebody using this algorithm, if he wants to decrypt it, he needs two things. One is the algorithm, other thing he needs is the key. All the algorithms are in public domain. You could get them easily. But issue is key. And now if I got 4 people who I'm sending a message to, what I need is I need to send a message to all of them. And somehow I have to securely send the key to all of them. Right? So the issue with this kind of encryption is key handling and key management, where the same key is used for encryption as well as for decryption. This kind of encryption is called secret encryption. This kind of encryption is called secret encryption or symmetric encryption. Okay, symmetric encryption, sometimes the word secret encryption you could find. Okay, where the same key is used for encryption as well as decryption. And the challenge is key handling and key management. Now comes another type of encryption where you generate a pair of keys in such a way if encryption happens with 1, decryptions happen with 2. If encryptions happen with 2, decryption happens with 1. Okay, means with the same key you can't both encrypt as well as decrypt. Now, this kind of encryption is called asymmetric encryption. Now you got asymmetric encryption where one key you're encrypting, with the other key you'll be decrypting. You can't encrypt, decrypt both with the same part of the key pair. Now what I do is I generate a pair of keys, give one with myself, okay, and give 2 to everybody. If message comes from me, you can use this key to read the message. Okay. Now similarly, J also generates a pair of keys, give one with himself, 2 with everybody, read the message. Okay. So that means what? That means each of us would be having a one part of the key pair with us, other will be giving to everybody else, okay, so that he could read our message. So that means if everybody has to manage a keychain which contains all these keys, so it becomes a challenge. So what happens is one part of the key pair goes to public domain. Now, one part of the key pair goes to public domain. That is, you publish some kind of a directory where all the public keys are there. Okay. And anybody wants, you can just take the public key and decrypt it. So this becomes what? Private key, and this becomes what? Public key. So it's a public and private key pair combination. Okay. Whatever is encrypted with private key can be decrypted with public key. Whatever is encrypted with public key can be decrypted with private key only. Okay. Now, the third kind of encryption you have is message digest or hash. And a hash data is encrypted, and a fixed bit output is obtained in such a way that if original changes, output changes. So the main objective of hashing is integrity of data, so that you can detect if something has been altered. Okay, so to prevent integrity of data, to maintain integrity of data, what you use is a hash or a message digest. So the different algorithms which enable it. Okay, now this whole thing is a part of is used is forms part of the public key infrastructure. Now, public key infrastructure is a comprehensive system that provides public key encryption and digital signature services to ensure confidentiality, access control, data integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation. Okay, so the whole of public key infrastructure concept is for these five objectives. Now, this is one thing which you use whenever you are digitally signing a document. For example, many of you would be uploading ITRs, which are digitally signed. So let's try to think what happens whenever a ITR is uploaded. Okay. Now you got first thing which you do is you have something which is your ITR. Now you have it in JSON file. So let's say this is a JSON file which you want to upload to the income tax side. So let's try to understand what exactly happens behind the scenes. Okay. So first of all, what happens is your JSON file, on it a hash algorithm is applied and a hash is generated. Okay. Now this hash code is encrypted with sender's private key. So what in fact you are buying when you are buying a digital signature is a private key along with a digital certificate certifying that this is you. Okay. So it's a private key which certifies that this is you. Now with your private key, what you're doing is you're encrypting the hash code. You're encrypting the hash code, and what you get is digital signatures. Now, these data signatures are appended on the original message. What you get is a signed original message. Then your system generates a symmetric key, and with symmetric key, it encrypts the original signed message. What you get is encrypted and signed message. Now your system downloads the public key of income tax server. Now your system downloads the public key of income tax server, and with that public key it encrypts a symmetric key. So what you get is an encrypted symmetric key. So whenever you're uploading your return, what actually happens is two things are uploaded. One is encrypted symmetric key, other is encrypted and signed JSON file. At the other end, what happens is, other end, what they get is the income tax server gets one is encrypted symmetric key, other is encrypted and signed message. Now, encrypted symmetric key was encrypted using the public key of server. Okay, how can it be decrypted? Of course, using the private key of server. Who would be having it? The server itself. So what it does is using the private key, it decrypts the encrypted symmetric key, and what it gets is a symmetric key. The encrypted signed message was encrypted using the same symmetric key which now the income tax server has. So using this symmetric key, it decrypts it, and what you get is a original signed message. From the original signed message, you extract the digital signature. Now, if you look at what was digital signature, it was the hash which was encrypted with sender's private key. It can be decrypted with sender's public key. Now, this digital signature is decrypted with sender's public key. Okay. And what you get is a hash code. The income tax servers generates a hash code once again. If both match, your document is e-verified. Now let's look at the process, why and where it helps. Okay. Now the five primary objectives we talked of was first is confidentiality. In this whole process, if you'll see, confidentiality of document has been obtained because the original document was encrypted with the symmetric key. Friends, always remember, symmetric key ensures confidentiality. You can note it down, right? Symmetric key always ensures confidentiality, right? Now, because this original JSON was encrypted with symmetric key, only somebody having the symmetric key can decrypt it. So that ensures confidentiality. So in this communication, confidentiality has been ensured. Okay. The second is integrity. Okay, because integrity is always maintained by hash. Okay, so in this process, what has happened is from the original message, a hash has been generated, and the income tax end again the hash was generated, and both were compared to see whether they match. Okay, so that would ensure what integrity of transmission. That would be the integrity of transmission. Now, the third is non-repudiation and authentication. Now, because using the sender's private key, income tax server was able to decrypt the digital signature. Now, one thing is sure, it was encrypted by the private key of the sender. So that ensures what? Non-repudiation. Tomorrow he cannot refute, I didn't sign it, because the income tax was able to decrypt with the public key of the sender. Okay, and it also has got a digital certificate issued by what? The certifying authorities. So many of us are using many certifying authorities. Okay, like SafeScript, like IDBRT. So many of these are there. Okay, so that ensures what? That ensures non-repudiation and authentication. Okay, and of course access control, because income tax server's private key would be with the income tax server, and the sender's private key would be in some kind of a cryptographic token, which again he would only have access to. Okay, so this is how all these kind of encryptions work to make the thing, make your communication uh, trustworthy, I'll say. These are all elements of trust. So you get trust through this process using various kind of encryptions. Okay, so my request to each one of you is study these encryptions very well, because you'll be getting tested on this. You'll be getting questions out of this. And moreover, we use it day in and day out in our lives. So it's good to understand the technologies which we are using day in and day out. Okay. So cryptographic systems are techniques which use one or more forms of cryptography to secure electronic transmissions. Okay, so you could have like TLS. Now what we have is HTTPS sessions. Okay, so in HTTPS, what happens is you want to initiate a secure session. The web server sends you the public key along with a certificate certifying that this key belongs to a specific server, like for example, income tax site. So whenever you got HTTPS connection, again encryption happens. Okay, now what happens is your system checks the certificate, validates the certificate. If the certificate is checked and verified, okay, then what your system does is generates a symmetric key, and this symmetric key is encrypted using the public key of the server. Okay, so this encrypted symmetric key goes to the server. Server has got its own private key. Using its private key, it decrypts. Now both the user as well as the server have the same symmetric key, and any message which goes across this symmetric key encrypts a message, server decrypts it, it sends it across. So this is how what you develop is a secure communication, which often happens whenever you're connected to bank, or for that matter income tax site. It's always HTTPS connection. Okay. So friends, that was a bit quick refresher, I'll say, of module one. Okay, so let's quickly, because we've got limited time, so I'll be moving on to module two now. Just give me a moment to share my slides. Okay, friends, on to module two. Now, friends, module two is information system assurance services. And honestly, we all being chartered accountants, I believe we are more comfortable with this module, because ultimately we are auditors. We know these concepts a lot. But let me tell you one thing. Okay. That is, this module is more about how it should be done, right? A lot of times there's a difference between how we do it and how it should be done. So here, our practical knowledge, yes, is needed, but we got to correlate with how it should be done. So it's more about that. So that is why you have to be very careful when coming with this module, or when learning this module, because you often get questions where you try to do it the practical way, but here it has to be the way it should be. Okay. Now, module two is information system assurance services. Okay. Very basic concept. Basic concept is of data. What is data? Data is any fact or observation okay, or any number which might not mean anything. Now, when you give any context to data, when it is becomes meaningful, utilizable by you, that is information. So data gets converted to information when you assign a meaning to it, when it is utilizable by you. Now, this information, when you analyze and look at patterns within information, you look at rules within information, become knowledge. Okay. And so knowledge is what? Knowledge is information which has been analyzed and stored, which can be used. That storage could be here, the storage could be here, right? So it is, information which has been analyzed and stored, which can be used. And the last stage is wisdom. Wisdom is when you add insights, when you add experience to the knowledge, and you do something that is about wisdom. It is a practical application of knowledge. But for practical application of knowledge, what you need to add to it is the experience or the insights which are there. Let me explain it by a simple example. I say five. What is five? Five is could be anything. 5 rupees, 5 kg, 5%, or whatever five, right? Which is raw, which doesn't mean anything, could carry any kind of meaning. But when I say the GP rate of my company is 5%, then now I'm giving this five a context. It is utilizable by me, it is useful to me, it is meaningful to me. Okay. But when I look at patterns within this information, I analyze all this information and I say, if I increase production by 20% of product A, my GP rate goes up by 2%. Now, what I'm looking at, I'm looking at interrelationships between the various factors. I'm analyzing the data. Now, this knowledge can be used in case I want to increase the production of product A. I can use this knowledge. Okay. Morning open economic times, there is a news item which says a new threat of Omicron has come. Okay. And the Ministry of Civil Aviation has banned all the flights and the cargo have all been. And the primary raw material I'm using for manufacturing product A is coming from China. It is coming from abroad. So my wisdom, my insight, my experience will tell me tomorrow or maybe day after tomorrow, the supplies are going to exhaust. So what I need to do is I need to shift to maybe product, maybe a different item. I've got to think about, a different raw material. I got to think about, a different product to manufacture. Okay, that is what? That is wisdom. Application of your product, application of your, practical knowledge or experience to the specific situation. Now, this whole path is called DIKW, how data gets converted to information, to knowledge and wisdom. Now, if I talk of information systems now, information system is a complementary network of hardware and software that people and organizations use to collect, filter, process, create, and distribute data. Okay, but friends, if I remove all this mumbo jumbo, information simply transform data to information which management can use to take effective decisions, wise decisions. Okay. Now, the goal of information system, one is effectiveness, other is efficiency, and third is securing of information. Now, effectiveness, friends, means effectiveness refers to the goal, refers to the objective. So effectiveness means meeting your goals, meeting your objectives, meeting the desired outcomes. So that is more about effectiveness. So effectiveness focuses more on what? The end. Okay, the goal, the objective, the desired things which should happen. Okay, whereas efficiency is more about what are the resources being expended to achieve that goal or achieve that objective. Okay, so it's more about optimization of resources. What is a path you have taken to achieve that goal, right? So it's more about the resources being expended to achieve your goals. So effectiveness is more about what is to be done. Efficiency is more about how it is to be done. Okay, and also one thing which is very very important is the security of information. So one of the objectives of information system is to secure the information. So when we talk of securing, we talk of those three objectives of security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, friends, Question is why there is a need for audit of computers. So one is cost of data loss, which is huge. Okay, then there is cost of incorrect decision making. Today, every decision and most of the decisions are being made using some kind of information systems. A simple path of going out on a way is facilitated by an app which I probably we all use. That is what Google Maps. So now any path we want to go is again decided by what? It is decided by an application or decided by some kind of computers. Okay. So there is a cost of incorrect decision making, right? So decisions have to be correct. Then there is a cost of computer abuse. Computer abuse is where victim suffered and perpetrator gained. Okay. Now, all these things like hacking, ransomware, attacks, APTs, all these are growing in number. There is a cost of computer abuse. Then you also need to audit and control computers because the value of hardware, software, and personnel is huge, and any computer error gets compounded, and the cost is again massive. Okay, and of course the need to maintain privacy. Your data is now crisscrossing the globe, so there is a need to maintain privacy. That is why we need to audit and control the computers. Okay. So if you look at the definition of IS auditing, it is the process of collecting and evaluating evidence to determine whether a computer system safeguards data, maintains data integrity, allows organizational goals to be achieved effectively, uses resources efficiently. So these are broadly the four objectives behind information system audit. Okay, the safeguarding objectives, the integrity objectives, the effectiveness objectives, and the efficiency objectives. But if we go to the definition of IS auditing, which has been given by Isaka, so that explains how these points are interlinked among each other. But looking at the basic definition of audit, what does audit mean? Audit have got two essential components. One is there has to be system. So audit is systematic. It has to have a defined process, right? And second thing, which is very, very critical for audit, is it has to be independent. Okay, it has to be independent of the line function. Okay, that independence attribute is very, very critical when an audit is concerned. See, if an employee, he himself is checking something, doesn't amount to audit. Audit is when somebody independently examines those things. Only then it becomes an audit. So two things which are very critical for an audit is, one is it has to be systematic. It has to be independent examination of data, statements, records, operations, and performances for a stated purpose. Okay, so that stated purpose is what is the assertion which is to be audited. Okay, so that stated purpose could be financial. Like we go for financial audits, we are looking at balance sheet, we are looking at the profitability statements. Okay, so that is financial audit. Okay, the stated purpose could be checking the controls of an organization, which you do in system audit. Okay, or you do in internal audits. So there is stated purpose or the intended or the assertion is different. Okay, or it could be checking the security of an organization. Now the stated purpose is looking at the security angle. Okay, looking at the CIA of the systems. Okay, where the assertion is about the security of an organization. So point is, stated purpose could be anything. It need not necessarily be financial. It could be non-financial in terms of systems. So any assertion we want to verify, to examine, and we do a systematic independent examination of it, is what audit is about. Okay. Now, internal audit is an independent and objective assurance and consulting activity which adds value. Okay, which adds value to improve the organization operations. Okay. And as I said, the definition given by IS auditing is a very comprehensive definition. It says IS audit refers to any audit that encompasses wholly or partly review and evaluation of automated information systems, related non-automated processes, and the interfaces between them. So broadly, if you just try to think of this definition, it is talking of three things. Number one, automated systems. Number two, non-automated systems. Number three, the linkages between them. Now, friends, being very honest with you, we as chartered accountants are expert in controls, non-automated systems. Yes, we are control experts. We are very good as far as linkages are concerned. Okay, in the process of studying, in the process of auditing, We know not a lot about linkages, how the various components work with it. I mean, so we are aware of the chains or the linkages which are there. The only thing we need to catch up with is technology or the automated information systems, and we could become a very, very good IS auditors. We could be the best IS auditors which could be there. Okay. So three things. First is automated systems, second is non-automated systems, and third is linkages between them. Okay, so it is a review and evaluation of automated, non-automated, and linkages. And I said we are very good in two. Third one we need to bring up. See, I'm a firm believer. We need to know technology. Okay, you might not be knowing the nitty-gritties of technology, but yes, you need to know technology. If you have to go into this area, one thing which is paramount is knowing technology. Okay. Now, one thing which often comes up is whenever you're auditing, you are bound by some kind of standards and guidelines. Okay. Thing to understand is standards give you minimum level of acceptable performance. At the minimum, this has to be done. Okay. They also inform management and other interested parties of what has been done. Okay. One thing to remember is standards give you the minimum level of what is required. For example, if you're going, by the by AS15, okay. Now it says actuarial valuation has to be done at least every year. Now you could go more often than that, but it says minimum this has to be done. So one is it gives you minimum level, right? Second is it informs management and other interested parties. So if you say in your financial statements that the accounting standards have been followed, now the stakeholder is assured that whatever is written in those accounting standards would have been followed. Okay, so they inform the other party as well as they give you the minimum level of acceptable performance. Okay, so sometimes this question comes in the exam like standards gives you minimum level, optimum level, maximum level. So always think of minimum level. That is this is a minimum which at least you got to do if you're following the standard. Okay. Now, per se, essays which are standards meant for us are not for IS audit. But if you look at the scope of SAPs, okay, it says the SAPs may also have application as appropriate to other related function of auditors. It means what? It means wherever we as chartered accountants perform any kind of a test function, we are bound by essays. And one essay which basically summarizes the whole audit function is essay 200, okay, which gives you the principle of an audit. So essay 200 talks about integrity, objectivity, and independence of an audit function or independence of an auditor. Okay, it also talks about the skill and competence. The assignment you're taking, you should be skilled for that. You should have competence for that. Okay, then it also talks about confidentiality. You got to maintain confidentiality regarding your client's data. Then it also talks about how work performed by others has to be handled in an audit. Okay, uh, SA 200 also talks about documentation. The documentation you need to maintain for any kind of an audit. You'll be checking the accounting systems and internal controls, and you'll be concluding the audit and reporting on the same. So these basically enshrine the entire principles of an audit. Okay. Now, friends, there is also one standard which is standard by ISACA. These are called ITF, IT Assurance Framework. So these are also assurance standards which are followed. And our institute now has got an MOU also with ISACA, where we can also use these standards. Okay. Now, ISACA has got a system of standards, guidelines, and tools and techniques. So standards gives you mandatory requirement. That is, at least this much we got to do. What is to be done? Okay. But the standards are very brief. They don't tell you how to do it. So it's more about what is to be done, what is or not to be done, right? Then guidelines are used in applying the auditing standards. So they got detailed guidelines where they tell you how you will be applying these standards. Okay. Then there is a section on tools and techniques where detailed procedures are given. For example, you want to do a risk analysis. Now, how to do risk assessment, right? So they got a whole procedure for that. How will you proceed with the risk assessment? Okay. Then you also need to know a bit about Information Technology Act, okay, and SOX again, some things you need to know, and PCAOB again, some things you need to know. Now, whenever you are conducting an IS audit, any form of audit, okay, broadly is what? Three things: plan, execute, and report. Okay. Now, plan is understanding. Whenever you need, first thing you need to do is you need to plan for an audit. Okay. Now, for that, you need to understand the environment and set up the objectives of the audit. Right. Uh, Probably some of you would remember earlier we had standards on accounting, which is on knowledge of business. Okay. So whatever we are auditing, we need to know about that. Okay. So we got knowledge of business which is required. So similarly, what is required is, first thing for planning required is you need to understand the environment. Okay. Then set up what are your objectives. Okay. Then you'll be going to risk assessment. Sure. Now, because we are more into risk based audits. Okay. In risk based audits, it's important to do a risk assessment and control identification. So once you assess the risks, look at the controls, you'll be finalizing your audit program according to which you'd be working. Okay. So after planning will come the execution stage of the audit. In executing, you'll be doing sampling. Okay. You'll be doing some kind of testing on the various samples. Okay. You'll be documenting the results. Okay. Which would be your audit evidence. You could also be using some kind of audit tools or computerized audit tools you could be using. Then once you have analyzed, you have executed, you have sampled, okay, obtained evidence, analyzed evidence, then you go with the audit report and recommendations. Okay, audit report, reporting part is you make an audit report, discuss it with the lower management, finalize, and then present to the upper management. Okay, and friends, the last stage in any kind of an audit is follow up. Okay, the last stage in any kind of audit is follow up. So these are broadly the three stages which are there in any kind of an audit: planning, executing, and reporting. Now, audit process. Okay, now audit process is systematic process involving objectively obtaining and evaluating evidences regarding assertions. Okay, forming an opinion, reporting on the same. So that is the whole process which is there in auditing. You obtain evidences, evaluate them, form an opinion, and report on the same. But the point is, let's say you go to an organization and you say, give me these documents. I want to interview you. The auditor will say, sir, what right do you have of asking me this question? What is your right? What is your authority through which you are asking me to produce these documents before you? Now, this whole mandate is given by the audit charter. So auditor should have a clear mandate to perform the IS audit function. Now, this mandate is given to you by the audit charter. Now, audit charter defines the purpose, responsibility, authority, and accountability of an audit function. Okay. Now, on this, many times questions come. So get hold of this concept. See, audit charter is through which purpose, responsibility, authority, and accountability of the audit function is defined. Okay. And it is often finalized by the senior management. Okay. And who give the audit charter to the audit function. Normally, the internal audit function, they give this charter. Okay. Uh, but wherever there are external parties involved, if you are an external auditor, then what you got is engagement letter. In the engagement letter, you will inform the auditee, these are my responsibilities, these are my authorities, and these are my accountabilities. And it will be accepted by the auditee or the management. So engagement letter is issued by you as an auditor and accepted by the auditee or the management, right? So, It will define that you can go to any of the premises, you can ask anybody any question. So your authorities are all defined where? They are defined in the audit charter. Okay, so they define your responsibility, authority, and accountability. Now, this concept is very important to understand. Okay, that of audit objectives and control objectives. So if you look at the whole thing, it says basic purpose of IS audit is to identify control objectives and related controls that address these objectives. Now, one thing which we need to understand is the concept of control objectives. Control objectives very simply means objective behind a control, objective behind implementing a control. So first comes control objectives, then come the controls. Okay. Now, for example, I don't want data from my laptop stolen. I don't want data from my laptop stolen. So that is what? That is my control objective. Now, to achieve this control objective, I put a lock on the door. Okay. I put, biometric controls. Okay. I put things like, I would say, access controls, things like password. Password is a one control which is being put for what? For the control objective that nobody should be able to take data out of my systems. Nobody can steal my data. I put a lock on the door. Why? Because that is one control I put so that nobody can come to my machine and take out data from that. Right? So one thing which we need to understand very, very clearly is controls are implemented to achieve control objectives. Controls are implemented to achieve control objectives. Now, audit objective is to identify control objectives and seeing whether controls have been implemented to achieve those objectives. Now, this concept, okay, it could. I want you to understand this concept very well because you often get asked questions based on this. See, whenever we go to an audit, whenever we go to an audit, we do many of these things instinctively. Right? If somebody tells you to document it, so it becomes very difficult to document. Right? But most of the things you are doing instinctively. But this is where it comes into play that you should learn how to document these things. Okay. So you go to any organization and you tell your auditee, sir, your controls are very weak. Or you tell them, sir, your controls are very strong. My question to you, weak or strong? These are what? These are relative terms. So how did you identify controls are weak, or how did you identify that controls are strong? When you say weak or when you say strong, it means it is with reference to something. Okay, let's say there are 5 points to be considered. Out of this, 4 have been implemented. Okay, then you could say yes, they are good. Implementation is good. If 5 things have to be implemented, and only 1 has been implemented, you'll say what? You'll say, yes, it is weak. Control implementation is weak. So what are these 5 things? These 5 things are as defined by the control objective, right? So first thing which we need to do is we need to find out control objective. For that control objective, let's say 5 controls have to be implemented to achieve that objective. So first thing which we need to do is we need to identify the control objective. Once we identify the control objective, then we could say for achieving this control objective, these 5 things are required. These 5 controls are required. Out of these 5 controls, while auditing, if we find that only 1 has been complied, then what we'll say? We'll say the controls are weak and the rest of the 4 form part of a recommendation. Right? Or if out of 5, if 4 have been implemented, we'll say, yes, your controls are good. Okay, so now let's read the whole thing again. Audit objective is identify control objectives and seeing that the related controls that address those objectives have been implemented. So very important thing to understand is audit objective is understanding the control objectives and seeing whether controls have been implemented to achieve those objectives or not. Okay, so this concept becomes very, very important because often, questions are framed around these things. Now, friends, for the audit or otherwise, you could also get an assignment for development of a RFP. So any RFP, you'll have some kind of an introduction there. You would have what are the requirements, okay? What would be the selection criteria? You'd have some kind of timelines, okay? You'd have a process, what would be the process? Request, you'll be giving a request, you'll be asking request for references, okay, and a point of contact. And many times, you'll be also responding to RFPs, like for IS audits. Many times, you get these RFPs. So whenever you're responding to an RFP, what you need is you'll be having some kind of introduction about your organization. You'll be submitting the technical bid. You'll be giving a price offering. You'll be giving commercial terms in terms of what are the milestones according to which you want payment at what stage. You will be giving your point of contact, and you will be providing the references which have been asked in the RFP. Okay. Now, friends, honestly, there is nothing like an IS audit. Okay. There's nothing like an information system audit. Your information system audit would always have a scope, right? So you could have a systems and application audit, you could have information processing facilities audit, you could have a system development audit, okay, you could have a client server telecom audit. See, try to understand, information system is a huge area. So information system is about hardware, information system is about software applications, information system is about the facilities, information system is about data information. It's a very, very wide area. So if you say something like information system audit, uh, it would have a very, very huge scope, right? So what is required is, for any kind of an audit, you need to define your scopes. Okay, so that could be done through various kind of audits which are there. Okay. Then friends, one thing which is very, very critical is independence. Okay, independence is a very, very important criteria when you talk of an audit. Most of the fiascos you have seen, be it Enron, be it Parmalat, or be it any other of these, one thing which is always questionable in these kind of frauds or fiascos is the auditor's independence. Okay, so information system auditor has to be independent of the auditee in attitude as well as appearance. Okay, they have to be independent of auditee in attitude as well as appearance. And friends, let me tell you one thing: appearance precedes attitude. Attitude is a state of mind. It is a state of being independent. Okay, but you have got to appear to be independent also. Okay, let's say you're auditing your father's firm. Then despite how much attitude you could have, you will not appear to be independent. Okay, if you're auditing your father's firm, you will never appear to be independent. So friends, appearance always precedes attitude. Okay, now independence also means that he has to be independent of the area being auditing, right? So you can't be part of the line function. If you're part of line function, you can't maintain objectivity. So for independence, objectivity is very, very critical. So one thing which is needed is objectivity, and for objectivity, you have to be independent of the area being audited. Okay. Now, friends, also you got to maintain professional ethics. You got to comply with standards. You got to serve in a diligent, loyal, and honest manner. Okay. You cannot knowingly be part of illegal activities. You have to maintain privacy and confidentiality of information of your clients. This information you cannot use for your personal benefit, and you got to perform duties in an independent manner. Okay. One thing which you would have seen in SA 200 says skills and competence. So you should only undertake activities as per the competence for which you have the skills, for which you have the competence. Okay. And you got to perform your duties with due professional care, which is there, and inform appropriate parties of the results of an audit. So you're accountable to what? You're accountable as per the audit charter, right? You're accountable as per the audit charter. Okay. And you have to maintain high standard of conduct, which is required of an auditor. Now, friends, first thing which you need is you need to plan for an audit. Now, the audit, the planning should be done in a way that it addresses the audit objectives. Of course, we got SA 300, and those who have gone through SA 300 will understand the concepts very well. Okay. So one is to address the audit objectives. Planning, whenever planning, you got to think about the audit objectives. Second is you have to optimize the use of audit resources, because honestly, friends, in every organization, auditing is considered an extra function, right? So often the resources which are given to audit, the budgets which are given to audit are always less. So you are always short-staffed. You are always have got very less of the budgets which are there. So you got to plan in a way so that you can optimize the critical resources you have or the scarce resources you have. At the same time, while planning, you have to comply with the professional auditing standards. In audit planning, you got to think about audit charter. Okay, you got to think about changing technologies. They also have to be addressed in that. You have to think of new evaluation techniques. Okay, rather than probably now, if you go for an audit, you'll be going by deploying some kind of audit tools which are there. You'll be using more of CAD tools now. Okay, for your audit, and you'll be doing the risk assessment for the audit and understanding the overall environment which is there. Okay. There's a concept of risk universe. Now, risk universe is all the risks which could affect an entity. So, for an organization, it'll be a good idea if they know all their risks so that they can be mitigated. So, for that, they could make something like a risk register. Okay. See, at one point of time, a risk was IT risk was considered more of a what I'll say is a operational risk. Okay. But today, friends, IT pervades every facet of any organization. Okay, so like, can you think of Amazon without IT or IS? Okay, can you think of Uber without IT or IS? So for them, their whole strategy is dependent on that. So yes, it's a strategic risk. Okay, the couple of days back, you saw the Amazon some problem with the Amazon cloud. So a lot of organizations couldn't function. Okay, so it's of course a strategic risk. The whole credibility and reputation of that organization could go if it is not available for a couple of hours. Or sometime back, probably you would remember the fiasco which happened with Facebook and the related apps, Instagram and WhatsApp and all. So that created a huge uproar all across the world. Okay, so the whole strategy is dependent on the whole strategies of these organizations dependent on IT. So there's a big strategic risk. So point is, now IT risk is preventing all the different facets of your organization. Okay. Now, the risk analysis, the definition given by ISO 27005 is the potential that a given threat will exploit vulnerabilities of an asset or a group of assets to cause loss or damage to the asset. So it consists of components like assets, like vulnerabilities, like threats. Okay. Now, asset is anything which has got a value. So it could be hardware, it could be software, it could be people. Okay, it could be utilities, it could be infrastructure. So first thing you need to do is you need to identify your assets. Okay, a threat is an external factor which could harm, which could impact on an asset. Okay, so it is any undesirable act which affects a system or a process. Now, threat will impact an asset where it has got some kind of vulnerability. So vulnerabilities are internal system weaknesses on which threat makes an impact. Okay, and impact is the ultimate outcome, loss, or adverse consequence of a threat, attacking a asset. Friends, the overall risk is a function of threats, vulnerabilities, and their related impacts. Okay. Even if you apply all the controls, still there'll be some risk which would be there, which is called residual risk. So residual risk is the remaining risk once controls have been applied. So you need to have an acceptance for the risk. Okay, you need to have some acceptance level for the risk because you have to decide the loss you are willing to bear. Okay, and for that, what you need to do is risk management. What you have to do is risk management. Now, there are various ways or various directions you could take when you talk of risk management. One is you can increase controls. Okay, one is you can increase controls to mitigate the risk, to reduce the risk. Okay, you can self-insure. Okay, for what I'll say is a 10,000 impact, you can't put a 20,000 control. Okay, so you'll say once in a while it happens, it's fine again. Okay, so for a 10,000 impact, you can't put a 20,000 control. So what you'll do, you'll self-insure, or you can transfer the risk. Okay, for example, insurance, you're transferring the risk. Ignore the risk. Never ever ignore the risk. Do risk analysis and manage it. Okay, friends, we got two concepts. One is that of a business risk and then IS risk. Okay, business risks impact the business assets, whereas IS risk impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your IS assets. Okay. Then in the process of risk analysis, first thing you'll be doing is you'll be knowing your assets, because you can't protect what you cannot know. Okay. So first thing which is required is you list your assets. Okay. You value your assets. Okay. The valuation could be based on various factors. Valuation could be based on how many people are using that asset, how that asset is lost. Scenario one, I lose a very critical file. Second is my competitor steals it. So the value would be different. Okay, so how many people are impacted by how many people are using that asset? Okay, so all these factors are taken care for valuing the assets. Okay, value you could think of in terms of what could be the impact on the organization because of loss of that asset. Okay, then you look at threats and probabilities. Okay, what are the threats, what are the probabilities of their occurring? You calculate expected losses, identify the various controls, you determine what is the cost of control. Okay, so that is the process of risk analysis. Just to take a very simple example to understand it. Okay, I'm just taking one example from the ITAF which is there. Okay, let's say we got a facility. We got a facility by the we got a facility which is our asset. Okay, and then let's say the threat is from fire. We've identified the threat from fire. Okay, asset value is let's say 4,80,000, 480 lakhs. Okay, and exposure factor is 50%. Means, see, if a facility is destroyed by fire, it won't be 100% destroyed with fire. We estimate that foundations, probably some walls, some kind of things would remain. So we estimate the loss to be 50%. So my potential loss is 2,40,000. Okay. Now the probability, I guess, is 25%. Means every 4 years, let's say, based on historical data, approximately every 4 years a fire occurs. Okay. So my probability is 25%. So my annualized loss is how much? 60,000. And the annual cost of control means those fire suppressants, fire detectors, fire extinguishers. The cost is, let's say, the annualized cost of control is, let's say, uh, up now 35 lakhs, right? Now, I think so. What we'll do is we'll implement the control to mitigate this risk. We'll implement the control. But if you look at here, there is a asset which is trade secret, and the threat is from theft. Okay, asset value is 50,000. 80% we estimate would be lost. Our potential loss is 40,000. Let's say probability is 75%. A lot of hacking is going on. Annualized losses is 30, and annualized cost of control is 45. Now here what we'll do is we'll self-absorb, because my potential loss is less than the cost of control. So important thing is we'll do risk analysis. Okay, we look at assets, we look at threats, we look at vulnerabilities. Okay, based on that, we'll determine whether to absorb, whether to implement controls. So that would be something which would be decided by us. Let me take a very simple example. You'll understand the concept better. So let's say I want to do a risk analysis of this place. Okay, so first thing be doing is I'll be listing the assets. Okay, first thing I'll be doing is I'll be listing the assets. Let's say one of the asset is this table here. Okay, now then second thing is I'll be looking at value. Okay, so let's say the value of this table is let's say 10,000, right? Now what are the threats? Okay, next is I'll be looking at threats. So the threat, could be threat could be number one could be fire. Okay, threat could be from fire. Threat could be from breaking of this table. Threat could be theft of this table. Threat could be termite to this table. Okay, so a lot of these threats could be there, right? That is adverse event which could impact this asset. Okay, next is we'll be looking at vulnerabilities. See, vulnerabilities are system weaknesses on which threat impacts. Okay, now first is threat from fire. Why is this threat there? This threat can impact the vulnerability because the vulnerability of the table is it is made of wood. Because it is made of wood, it can catch fire. So vulnerability is it is made of wood. It can catch termite. Why? Because again, it is made of wood. Okay, somebody can break it. Okay, somebody can break it. Why? because this is not strengthened and it is made of wood, which can break. Okay, somebody can steal it. Why? Because it is portable. So you got to do threat analysis. You need to do vulnerability analysis. Okay, after doing that, you will be looking at probabilities. You will be looking at probabilities. Fire, chances are medium because there are some inflammable materials around, so chances are medium. Okay, uh, then I mean termite. So there are no chances because it is located away from the walls and also the chances are very low. Okay, anybody breaking, chances are very low. Okay, anybody stealing, again it's a heavy table, so it's very difficult to transport, so chances are very less. So you look at probabilities of those threats occurring, based on which now you'll be determining what are the controls I could put. I could have, anti-termite, okay, anti-termite treatment on the table. I could have, like fire extinguishers, fire suppressors. They all could be installed. Looking at cost of control, I'll be implementing those controls. Now, risk analysis, there could be quantitative way, there could be even qualitative way. So you, for treasury system, you determine that the risk factor is 158. Okay, whatever method, I'm not going into details. Okay, in case you want more, go to ITF. Okay, so based on my assessment of various areas, I find treasury unit risk factor is 8096, BCP it is 810, payroll it is 495. Now, if I have to deploy my audit resources, my question, which is the area I should focus more? I'll be employing more resources on treasury because there the risk ranking is very high. Okay, risk ranking is very high. So I'll go for the, okay, so that is how we do a risk-based audit. Internal control is policies, procedures, practices which are designed to provide reasonable assurance that business objectives will be achieved, undesired events are prevented, detected, and corrected. Based on which, what we got is preventive controls, detective controls, and corrective controls. So, friends, whenever general controls are combined with IT controls, what we get is internal controls. Today, internal controls are a combination of IT controls as well as general controls. Okay. And if we combine IT application controls with IT general controls, what we get is IS controls. Okay. So as I said, control is a system that prevents, detects, or corrects any unlawful events, based on which we got preventive controls. Now, all those controls which are used to prevent something from happening are part of preventive controls. For example, employ qualified personnel. Okay, segregate duties. Ultimately, for what? For preventing errors. All access controls are preventive controls. Okay. Then we got detective controls. Detective controls detect and report an error. Very critical. Detect an error and report the same. So things like hash we discussed, okay, or message adjust, or echo controls, or error messages. Even your audit, your audit is what? It's a detective control. You detect and report. Then we got corrective controls. Whatever has happened has happened. How do we retrieve? Okay, how to correct an error? So all the DRP, BCP, or backups or reruns, all these are part of the corrective controls. Okay. Now, objective of IS controls could be in terms of fiduciary, where it is reliability and compliance. Objectives of IS control even could be in terms of quality, that is effectiveness and efficiency. It could also be the security, which are the three pillars of security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. Now, we got internal control objectives and IS control objectives. Internal control objectives can be translated into IS control objectives. For example, we could have an internal control objective safeguarding the assets. Now, if you just think carefully, then maintaining integrity of data, which is an IS control objective. If you look at ultimate objectives, what? Safeguarding your assets. Similarly, if you look at the IS control objective, backup data is ultimately for what? Ultimately, again, for safeguarding your assets. So each of the IS control objectives can be related to some kind of an internal control objective. Okay. So this is how various things are interrelated. Threat creates an attack, detective control discovers the attack, detective control triggers preventive control, which reduces the impact. Okay. And vulnerability is protected by preventive controls. Any attack exploits a vulnerability. So these are some interrelationship between various factors which are there. Okay, so in a typical procedure, you'll have a subject to audit, you'll have a scope and objective, you'll have some kind of pre-audit planning. Okay, You'll be understanding the audit environment. Okay, you'll be collecting evidence, evaluating the results, communication results to management, final report, and last stage, friends, is follow up. Okay. So two kind of tests which are done. One are compliance tests, other are substantive tests. Compliance tests simply mean complying with the controls, so where we test the controls. Substantive tests are where we test the details. Okay. So compliance tests, for example, if you check for user access rights, we're looking for controls. Okay. Or program documentation, we're looking for controls. So wherever controls are tested, that becomes your compliance testing. And wherever details are being checked, okay, for example, you recalculate a sample, so you're going for detailed checking, right? So that becomes what? Substantive testing. Okay. Now audit risk is the risk that the report may contain a material error. Audit risk is the risk I'm willing to take, because see, when I say I'm 95% confident this means what? I'm taking a 5% risk, right? So it's a base risk which I'm willing to take. Okay. Now, audit risk is a function of number one, inherent risk. Inherent risk is within the process itself. It is within the process, within the business. Okay. Inherent risk of for a long project is always more as compared to a short project, because anything could go wrong in a long project. Technology could change, a war could happen, anything could happen in a long project, right? So inherent risk is high as compared to a short project. Okay. Control risk is controls are implemented, but they might not, like prevent a control. Okay. They might not detect an error, right? They might not prevent an error. For example, you could have, you got automated testing. Scenario one, you got automated testing where every day in the morning, the system comes up with a log which tells you that the balances are exceeding the sanction limit in a bank. The second control could be manager in the morning just looks at all of them and sees whether the balances are exceeding the sanction limits. In both these cases, controls are there, but control risk is high in the case of where person is manually checking the things. Wherever automated log is there, control risk is less. So you look at control risk also. Detection risk is whatever methodologies the auditor has adopted, still he is not able to discover the error. That is called a detection risk. So friends, audit risk is a function of inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. One thing which you always need to remember is, as an auditor, you cannot change the detection risk. You cannot also change the control risk because control is implemented by the management. The only thing you can change is the detection risk and thereby manage your overall audit risk. In a risk-based audit, you assess the risk, you rely on the risk, you allocate limited audit resources and do an audit. Okay. So in the risk-based audit, you again gather information, look at inherent risk assessment, you understand internal controls, you do control risk assessment, detection risk assessment. Okay.
Recording in
totality of
progress.
situations, and you also have to look at materiality of findings. Okay. After evaluation comes reporting. You use an appropriate form of report to intended recipients. Your report will be having scope, objectives, period of coverage, nature and extent of audit. You will be providing your findings, conclusions, recommendations, and any reservations or qualifications in your report. And friends, last stage is audit follow-up. Okay. Now, audit follow-up would be based on the criticality of your findings. If there is one finding which is very, very critical, then probably you'll have to follow probably the very next day. But if there is some finding of yours which is recommendatory in nature, then probably the next annual audit you could go and look at whether it has been rectified or not. Now, friends, so that was a very, very, I'll say, quick review of module 1 and 2. Okay. So as I said, this is primarily with two objectives. Number one, those who have already gone through the course would be kind of a refresher for them. Okay. It would be a revision of the concepts you've already read. But for others who are yet to start their preparation, it could be kind of a, I'll say, foundation where you could understand the things and go forward. Okay. So we've got now Mr. Naresh Gandhi who's also joined us, who will be taking the next module. And he is a wonderful faculty, and even I have studied from him. So he's a wonderful faculty here. Will be taking the next module. And at the same time, I want to wish each one of you the best in exams. I wish each one of you success in exams. But friends, let me tell you one thing. Only this refresher course won't do. Right? If you're thinking just by attending a refresher course, you should be able to crack an exam, uh, probably tough. You'll have to go through the book. You'll have to go through the book. You'll have to understand the concepts. You'll have to go through some questions. Many of them are hosted on ESA PQC portal. Okay, go to the portal, do those questions. When you do the questions, you will be recognizing your gaps. Then you will be knowing what are the areas where you need to do further. Revisit the background material. Let me tell you, background material is very, very essential if you really want to clear this exam. So come back to the background material, revisit the background material, whatever your gaps are, fill those gaps, go to the questions again. So that is the process. Probably you'll have to revisit many times, to get hold of the concepts, understand the concepts. But I'm sure of one thing. You have all committed to do this DISA. That is why you joined in the first place. Okay. And you have all dreamt of becoming DISAs. This DISA is all yours. Okay. One of the, I always refer to, one of the hot sellers, I'll say, a very interesting book which I read was by the name of Secret. The Secret says thoughts are things. Whatever you dream of, whatever you think of, first has to be conceived in your mind, only then it becomes a reality. And you all have dreamt of becoming DISAs. It is my firm conviction you all will be DISAs. But friends, at the same time, only dreaming won't do. Action also is required. Action in terms of going through the background material, going through questions, and revisiting the material. So that was, friends, module 1 and 2 for you. And Nareshji has joined. So Nareshji, I'm just unsharing. So can you please come up? Nishiji, I believe, Naresh, you have joined. Can you tell him to?
Yes, sir. He has joined. I'll just ask him.
Yeah, please.
Gandhi, sir, are you there?
So in the meantime, friends, wish you all the best in exams and keep your preparations up. A bit of effort probably is required every day. And DCA is not all that difficult also, It is much, much easier than CA. And you all have done CA. But yeah, so, at that time you have to do only one thing, study, study, and study. Now you got to don the hat of a parent, hat of a spouse, hat of an employer or an employee. So many different hats you got to wear. So that is why Sparing out time becomes difficult sometimes. But let me tell you one thing, friends. Time is all about prioritizing, right? Once we prioritize this thing that we have to do, yes, we can prioritize, and we can do anything. I mean, say if you overall analyze, then sometime you are spending daily on various social media platforms or something. If we just take a bit of time out of that, DISA is not all that difficult, and it's rewarding also. Not only in terms of assurance. Okay, what I always say is, tomorrow you could go for consulting assignments. Tomorrow you could go for many areas where you can really contribute. Because one thing which I'm a firm believer in, friends, is you give value, you get value. So if you give value to your clients, you give consulting, it could be through internal audits, you get the value. And once you learn all these things, you could have many areas where you could consult also. Okay. And even while studying, you could think from the perspective of what are the kind of consultings you could give in this area. Okay. So, any case, friends, wish you all the very best. So we got Mr. Naresh Gandhi who has joined us, and
Sure, sure, sure. I'll start now.
uh, so Naresh ji, a very good afternoon to you. And Naresh ji, you are muted, I think so. So you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. I think now it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. So very good afternoon to you.
Same to you, Mehtaji. Same to you.
The baton has been passed on to you for the next module. On this aspiring.
No issue. I'm just going to start sharing my PowerPoint presentation now immediately without wasting any time.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mehta sir.
Thank you, ji. Thank you.
Let me check. Am I visible, audible?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Some issue here. Again, an issue here. Well, anyways, you can. I'm audible as well as visible, so I'll just start. Without these slides, I can start. No issue at all. So, module 3. It's on concepts of it's on governance and management of enterprise information technology, risk management, and compliance. So, what we basically mean by governance and management of enterprise information technology? Yeah, am I visible or not? Let me check first of all.
Yes, sir. You are visible and your voice is also there.
Voice is there? Because I cannot see myself right now. I don't know. Anyways. So governance and management of enterprise information technology, risk management and compliance basically means how IT should be governed, how IT should be managed so that we get the maximum benefit of IT for our business processes. Risk management, since we are moving from paper to paperless environment, a lot of IT risk is there. So how do we mitigate IT related risk? And last is compliance. So governance and management of enterprise information technology means how IT should be governed, how IT should be managed, so that I get the maximum benefit of IT for my business processes. Risk management, since we are moving from paper to paperless environment, a lot of IT risk is there. So how do we mitigate IT related risk? And last is compliance. So first slide, these are the standard slides provided to us by DAP. The only thing is I've reduced the size of these slides, that's all. So first definition is governance. Governance is the combination of processes and structures implemented by the board to inform, direct, manage, monitor the activities of the organization toward the achievement of its objectives. Simple definition, governance is the combination of processes and structures implemented by the board to inform, manage, monitor activities of the organization toward the achievement of its objectives. Always remember one point, governance is the role of the board of directors. There is one more definition of governance. Governance, it ensures that stakeholders' needs, conditions, and options are evaluated to determine balanced agreed-on objective to be achieved. Setting direction through prioritization and decision making. Can you see my screen or not? Is it visible or not, Nishi? Is my screen visible or not? I'm not able to find it out. Is my screen visible or not?
No, sir.
Screen is not visible?
No.
Just a minute. There could be a technical issue then. Screen is not visible.
No, sir.
Now check. Is it visible now? Is it visible, Nishi?
Sir, it is saying that you have started screen sharing, but still the screen is not visible.
Why the screen is not visible here? I've shared my screen with you now.
Yes, it's visible now, sir.
Now it is visible.
Yes.
Anyways, we have wasted around 10 minutes unnecessarily. That means. Anyways, I'll start the definitions of the. Remember the slides by heart, there is no issue. So I was on this definition of governance. There is one more definition. Always remember one point. First of all, governance is the role of the board of directors under leadership of the chairperson. There is one more definition of governance, which is given in the module also. Governance, it ensures that stakeholders' needs, conditions, and options are evaluated to determine balanced agreed on objective to be achieved, setting direction through prioritization and decision making, and monitoring performance and compliance against agreed on directions and objectives. So definition of governance, it ensures that stakeholders' needs, conditions, and options are evaluated. First keyword, stakeholder. Who is the stakeholder? Board of directors, senior management, shareholders, employees, creditors, bankers, lenders, financial institutions, government, society, regulatory authorities. In other words, who's got interest in my business is a stakeholder. So how should the organization set the objective? Taking into account requirements of all the stakeholders. This is a key word. In any question you see option like stakeholder, you can go with it. But always remember one point, always read the question first, then the options. So first keyword is stakeholder. So how should the organization set the objective? Taking into account requirements of all stakeholders. And once you have taken into account requirements of all the stakeholders, then what we do is we need to prioritize. See, all the objectives will not be equally critical to us. I need to prioritize which objective will be achieved first, which afterwards. So once you have set your objectives, prioritize them, then we do the performance. It is equally critical to evaluate whether what we wanted we have been able to achieve or not. If not, then remedial action is required. So two definitions of governance I've given you. I think first definition you had missed because there was some problem in sharing of the screen. No issues. If we have lost 10 minutes, we'll increase the class by 20 minutes. Don't worry on that. So another definition of governance is it is the combination of processes and structures implemented by the board to inform, direct, manage, monitor the activities of the organization towards the achievement of its objectives. Always remember one point. Whenever you see this word governance, immediately you should strike. We are talking about the board level because governance is done at the board level. Second point, governance of enterprise IT. Governance of enterprise IT means how IT should be governed, how IT should be managed, so that I get the maximum benefit of IT for my business process. Friends, there are 6 chapters in this module. 6th is basically repetition of first 5 chapters. So what I will try to do is I'll try to pick up some relevant or very important topics here. Because the entire course is very long. So what I will do is try to cover at least the critical parts. Corporate governance is one of them. It's very important. First, definition of corporate governance. Corporate governance is a system by which companies are directed and controlled by the management in the best interest of the stakeholders and others, ensuring greater transparency and better and timely financial reporting. I'll just repeat. Corporate governance is a system by which companies are directed and controlled by the management in the best interest of the stakeholders and others, ensuring greater transparency and better and timely financial reporting. One more definition of corporate governance. Corporate governance system by which companies are directed and controlled to achieve the objective of increasing shareholder value by enhancing economic performance. So 2 definitions of corporate governance I have given you. Now I will discuss certain key three terms which we need to remember, which are very important. We say good corporate governance requires a strong internal control practices, such as segregation of incompatible functions, elimination of conflict of interest, establishment of audit committee, risk management, control assurance, proper and timely financial disclosures, including corporate disclosure requirements. Very important term, fixing of accountabilities, bringing about transparency. And why do all this? For the benefit realization of the stakeholders. Ultimately, everything will be linked to the stakeholders. I'll just repeat. We say good corporate governance requires strong internal control practices, such as segregation of incompatible functions. Example could be maker should not be checker. Elimination of conflict of interest, like your related party transaction. Establishment of audit committee, risk management, control assurance, proper and timely financial disclosures. Because in past it was seen accounts were manipulated. They were first. Very important term, fixing of accountabilities. One of the most important term when you talk about corporate governance, bringing about transparency. This is one of the most important terms in corporate governance, transparency. And why do all this? For the benefit realization of the stakeholders. Now in the option, benefit realization of the stakeholder is not there, benefit realization of the shareholder is there, still you can go with the option. But read the question first. And if both are mentioned, benefit realization of the shareholder as well as benefit realization of the stakeholder, obviously I'll go for benefit realization of the stakeholder. That is much broader. Stakeholder is much broader. And even if the option says benefit realization, still you can go with the option. If the question is on corporate governance, yes, you can go with it. Benefit realization of whom? Stakeholders only. So internal controls, I will not speak much about it. You are already aware of that. They are an integral part of any enterprise risk management. IT governance. If you see, we have highlighted IT governance here. They say you have to do any governance, you might as well do your IT governance. That will be ensured. Now, remember one statement I'm giving you. Whenever we use the word IT, make it as a subset. Like IT governance should be a subset of corporate governance. IT governance should be a subset of enterprise governance. So whenever you see this word like IT, make it as a subset. They say you have to do any governance, you might as well do your IT governance. It will be ensured. Enterprise governance. See, the moment you read this word enterprise governance, what comes to mind? You're talking about the entire enterprise. See, governance was a broader aspect, a broader term, which I explained to you. Governance that ensures that stakeholders' needs, conditions, and options are evaluated to determine balanced, agreed on objectives achieved, setting direction to prioritization and decision making and monitoring performance and compliance against agreed on directions and objectives. So governance is basically a broader term, a generic term. Enterprise governance speaks about one particular enterprise. Now I've gone into one particular enterprise. So what will come first? The definition. Now we are talking about one particular enterprise. That is enterprise governance. So governance was a broader term, or is a broader term. So what is the definition? Set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management with the goal of providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risks are managed appropriately, and verifying that the organization resources are used responsibly. See, the moment you're talking about enterprise governance, I have to take into consideration both board of directors as well as executive management. So that is why the definition of enterprise governance is like this. Set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management, and then with the goal of providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risks are managed appropriately, and verifying that the organization resources are used responsibly. Rest all is self-explanatory. But we need to understand. When you talk about enterprise governance, you're talking about the entire enterprise. So we have to take into consideration both board of directors as well as executive management. Now, this is something very important. I'll spend some time on this. Enterprise governance can be divided into two parts. One is corporate governance, also called as conformance. One is business governance, also called as performance. We need to understand the difference between conformance and performance. Right? We need to understand difference between conformance and performance. Or conformance is also called as corporate governance, and performance is also called as business governance. Corporate governance, also called as conformance. From the name itself, we can find out it is compliance oriented. We say conformance is compliance oriented and focuses on regulatory requirements. See what we cover under corporate governance: role of the chairman, role of the CEO, role and composition of the board of directors, different board committees, risk management, control assurance, proper and timely financial disclosures. It is compliance oriented. Which one? Conformance. It is compliance oriented. Different compliances. Are we taking care of different compliances or not? That is what is covered under conformance. How this corporate governance or conformance is addressed? Through best practices, tools, and techniques. And we say corporate governance is auditable. Yes, it is auditable. I know these are requirements of law. I can easily cross-verify whether we have been able to comply with different requirements of law or not. And which is a single dedicated oversight mechanism that ensures that my corporate governance issues are taken care of. Audit committee. Which is the single dedicated oversight mechanism. Now, what do you mean by the single dedicated oversight mechanism? Who is ensuring that corporate governance issues are being taken care of? That is the role of the audit committee. Now we talk about performance. Now the question is, am I doing my business only to meet requirements of law? No. Stakeholders will say, we have invested in your organization. What have we got in terms of revenue, in terms of dividend, in terms of growth? That is what is covered under business governance. So business governance, we say, is business oriented and it is proactive, whereas corporate governance is historic. Why we say corporate governance is historic? Because there is law. Till the time there is any amendment in the law, it will remain the same. Whereas business governance, we say, is proactive, that is responding to the changes at the earliest. And business governance cannot be standardized. No. Take, for example, you are a trading organization, I'm a manufacturing organization, you will have different set of practices, I will have different set of practices. But same problem is not encountered in case of corporate governance. Law remains more or less same for everybody. So business governance, we say, is proactive. It is business oriented. What we cover under business governance, the different business strategies, increasing profitability of the business, ensuring growth of the business, increasing revenue of the business, increasing profitability of the business. We talk about different business strategies, creating stakeholder wealth under business governance. And how this business governance is addressed through best practices, tools, and techniques. Corporate governance through standards and codes, law. Business governance through best practices, tools, and techniques. I'll just recapitulate again quickly. Let me finish off with the business governance first. And we say business governance not easily auditable. I'm not saying not auditable. I'm saying not easily auditable. And it's very easy to understand. Each organization will have its own set of practices. Now, when you talk about business governance, business has so many aspects. See, marketing is there, manufacturing is there, production is there, finance is there. So how many committees I'll make when you talk about business governance? So we say business governance responsibility of the full board. I'll go as per the module. Business governance responsibility of the full board. I'll just recapitulate quickly. Enterprise governance can be divided into two parts. One is corporate governance, also called as conformance. One is business governance, also called as performance. Corporate governance, we say, is historic and focuses on regulatory requirements. Different regulations, and how this corporate governance is addressed through standards and codes. There is law, and we say corporate governance is auditable, and which is the single dedicated oversight mechanism that corporate governance are taken care of. That is the role of the audit committee. Now the question is, am I doing my business only to meet requirements of law? No. This is what is covered under performance. We say performance, it is business oriented, it is proactive, whereas corporate governance is historic. So business governance, what it focuses on? Different business strategies, increasing stakeholder wealth, creating stakeholder wealth, increasing profitability of the business, ensuring growth of the business, increasing revenue of the business. It is business oriented, business governance. And how this business governance is addressed through best practices, tools, and techniques. And we say business governance not easily auditable, not easily auditable. and easy to understand. And business governance is a responsibility of the full board. Okay? I know my speed is slightly faster because now, of course, we have to cover it 1 hour. Yeah, I'll go further into this. We say corporate governance will ensure control failures are mitigated appropriately. Something important I'm going to tell you now. We say corporate governance will ensure corporate failures are mitigated appropriately, but corporate governance on its own will not ensure success. Meaning thereby performance is also required. We say corporate governance will ensure control failures are mitigated appropriately, but corporate governance on its own will not ensure success. Key message of enterprise governance is we must balance the twin dimensions of conformance and performance. We must balance the twin dimensions of conformance and performance. Meaning thereby conformance should not be so tight where performance suffers. It should not be so lax that every other day we get notices from different departments. But whatever module says, I'll go as per that. Our module says, when you talk about conformance and performance, which is more critical, here. Enterprise governance is the entire accountability framework of the organization with the 10 dimensions of conformance and performance with more emphasis on the later. So compared to conformance and performance, which is more important, more critical, more emphasis we have to give on performance. First top part you can leave, that I'll cover while covering COVID 5. Second part we can cover in this slide. Governance and IT governance are similar in their definition and approach, except that in case of IT governance, the focus is on IT and related areas. Nothing much to explain here. You talk about GAIT, the focus has to be on IT. It's a good slide. These are the standard slides provided to us by DAB. And in this slide, I've already covered this slide. In one slide, they have differentiated between conformance and performance, which I've already explained to you. But we need to balance the twin dimensions of conformance and performance with more emphasis on later, that is performance. Already covered with you. Yeah. Governance of enterprise IT, GEIT, is a subset of corporate governance. This is what I told you. See my cursor here. Whenever word IT is there, please make it as a subset. Because they say you have to do today, this is the criticality of IT. So you have to do any governance, you might as well do your IT governance. It will be ensured. The rest all is self-explanatory. This is something very important. Yes. This is important. There are 3 objectives of governance. 3 objectives of governance. Benefit realization, risk optimization, resource optimization. Quickly, I'll just go through them. But remember, there are 3 objectives of governance as per COVID 5. That is benefit realization, risk optimization, resource optimization. Now, what is benefit realization? How to get the maximum benefit of IT for my business processes. How to bring more process under IT environment. Any IT initiative which is not giving value addition, we discard it. From the name itself, you can find out how to get the optimum utilization of IT resources for your business processes. That is benefit realization. Risk optimization. Since we are moving from paper to paperless environment, a lot of IT risk is there. So how do we mitigate IT-related risk? Very simple. IT risk management should be integrated with the enterprise risk management, or IT risk management should be a subset of enterprise risk management. This is what I've told you. Whenever you see this word IT, make it as a subset. This could be there in the form of true or false. Which of the following statement is true? IT governance is a subset of corporate governance, or corporate governance is a subset of IT governance. First one is true. IT governance is a subset of corporate governance. Anyways, resource optimization. To meet my objectives, we require sufficient resources. Not only in terms of hardware and software, but in terms of personnel also. I'm working through obsolete hardware, obsolete software, we need to replace it. And how do we optimize human resources? Different techniques are there. Talking about human resources optimization. Different techniques are there through training, skill development programs, leadership development programs, career progression. What is career progression? I should see something coming to me in form of promotion. job retention, that is job security, job rotation. This is how we enhance human skills through training, skill development programs, leadership development programs, career progression, job retention, job rotation. Remember, these are the three objectives of governance. Because when you move ahead now, in these slides, you will see three practices of governance. So remember this, three objectives: the benefit realization, risk optimization, resource optimization. This is a standard definition of control. You can go through it. This is there in almost all the modules you will see. Now, this slide I've already covered. This is there in the module also, where we have differentiated between conformance and performance. So you will see this word balance scorecard. This is my last point that I'll be covering today. Even if we have to extend the class, but definitely we will cover this balance scorecard, chapter 5. Rest all I've already explained to you, standards and codes, best practices, tools and techniques. You can go to this slide. This is there in your module also, where we have differentiated between conformance and performance, which I've already explained to you. Let me explain this slide to you. IT governance and GEIT, governance of enterprise IT. See, in earlier times, what was happening was whenever any data was to be processed, we used to give it to IT department. They will do the processing. So IT was seen as a separate department which was engaged in data processing. Today, that concept has totally vanished. On each table, either we have a laptop or a desktop. IT is everywhere. So when I talk about GEIT, I'm basically talking about the entire enterprise. You read here, IT governance and governance of enterprise IT are used interchangeably. The term GIT is more macro and broader in its scope of coverage. Simple difference. In earlier time, IT was seen as one department which was engaged in data processing. Now gone are those days. On each table, either we have a laptop or a desktop. IT is everywhere. So when you talk about GIT, we're basically talking about the entire enterprise. So GIT is much broader, or in other words, you're talking about the entire enterprise. When you talk about GEIT, governance of enterprise IT. I will not cover all the points, but 2 points I will cover from here. Point number 1, aligning IT goals with business goals. This is the most important point. IT goals have to be aligned to the business goals. Remember this, IT goals have to be aligned to the business goals. IT strategy should be derived from the business strategy. IT strategy should be aligned with the business strategy. Otherwise, IT will move in one direction and business goals will move in the opposite direction. So point number 1, very, very important. IT goals have to be aligned to the business goals. One more point I will discuss here. This one. Difference between IT strategy and steering committee. This is a very important point. This is covered in your chapter 4, but I'll cover it. Give you a gist of this. See, concept of this IT strategy and IT steering committee is that board of directors, they work through different committees. One of the committee could be IT strategy committee. One of the committee could be IT steering committee. IT strategy committee will assist the board in governance and overseeing all IT-related matters. Please remember one point. Whenever you use this word governance, immediately it should strike you're talking about the board level, because governance should be done at the board level. So IT strategy committee will assist the board in governance and overseeing all IT-related matters. They will ensure that IT is a regular item on board's agenda for discussion so that the importance and criticality of IT could be drawn to the board of directors. In other words, IT strategy committee is the monitoring committee. It is the monitoring committee. IT steering committee is into deployment of IT and ensuring that IT deployment is as per business goals and objectives. IT steering committee is into deployment of IT and ensuring that IT deployment is as per business goals and objectives. Since IT steering committee is into deployment, implementation of IT, they will work at what level? Executive level. So IT strategy committee at board level, IT steering committee at the executive level. These 2 points are important, which I have covered. Remember those points. Questions I will not be having any time to discuss with you, friends. So what I will do is now I'll move on to second chapter. Second chapter is quite longish. In Zoom, it takes some time for the PowerPoint to start. If you see, heading of chapter 2, GRC frameworks. GRC framework, and then we have risk management practices. So before the slide opens, let me start GRC frameworks. What is GRC? Governance, risk, compliance. What is a framework? It's a structure on which you build our strategy, achieve objective, and monitor performance. Let us understand the heading of slide till the time the slides open. GRC, governance, risk, compliance. What's a framework? It's a structure on which you build our strategy, achieve objective, and monitor performance. Now we read these two words in totality, GRC frameworks. I want to ensure that my corporate governance issues are taken care of, my risk is managed, and my compliance issues are also taken care of. Is there any framework which helps me do this? In common language, what is a framework? It's like a guidance note which is giving you guidance. Deliberately, I use this word guidance note because as a CEO, we understand what is there in the guidance note. But as far as exam is concerned, we'll go as per the technical definition of framework. It's a structure on which build our strategy, achieve objective, and monitor performance. Now we read the two words in totality, GRC frameworks. I want to ensure that my corporate governance is taken care of, my risk is managed, and my compliance issues are also taken care of. Is there any framework which helps me do this? If there is a framework, I'll go through the framework, making use of that framework, taking guidance from the framework, and ensure that my corporate governance issues are taken care of, my risk is managed, and my compliance issues are also ensured. So two frameworks we will discuss. One is COSO and one is COVID-5. We have time, don't worry. Last two topics are lead and lag indicator and balance scorecard. These two topics I will cover at the end. Come what may, we have to cover that. Anyways, so two frameworks I have told you. We are going to cover. One is COSO and one is COVID-5. COSO. Now, whenever I read any framework, what is the full form of COSO? Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. Now, whenever I read any framework, first of all, I try to find out this framework relates to what. Automatically, once we are able to find out or ascertain this framework relates to this, many things are automatically clear to us. So first of all, full form of COSO, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. COSO is the Enterprise Risk Management Integrated Framework, which was first published by COSO, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, in 1992 to define internal control framework for business organizations, especially listed companies. In other words, or in common language, COSO relates to what? Is a framework of what? Internal controls. It's an internal control framework. And framework, I've told you in common language, what is the framework? It's like a guidance note. So COSO is an internal control framework. The moment I say it's an internal control framework, so many things are automatically clear to us. Now you're able to relate to it. So this COSO cube has got three dimensions. You can see my cursor here. First dimension in front of you depicts internal control and 5 interrelated components. Second dimension, the top one, speaks about control objectives. Third one provides internal controls at different levels of the organization. Nothing much to explain here. But this one I will explain. So first dimension, there are three dimensions. First dimension depicts internal control and 5 interrelated components. First, control environment. Control environment says, I'll just briefly touch on it. So control environment says for each business organization, we need to have a control environment depending upon the criticality and materiality of each business process along with each business process owner. Let me discuss some questions with you here. We need to understand the difference between owner and custodian. Very simple example I'll give you to differentiate between owner and custodian. So I'm head of the sales department. So whatever data relates to sales, I'm the owner of that. Below me, there are subordinate salesmen who are working under me. They're called as custodian. I'm head of the sales department. So whatever data relates to sales, I'm owner of that. Below me, there are subordinates, salesmen who are working under me. They become custodian. So who is a custodian? Who is temporarily given the custody of data. Let us discuss one more question here. How do we ensure there is adequate segregation of duties in the organization? How do we ensure that there is adequate segregation of duties in the organization? Answer is through authorization of access to data. Who is authorized to give authorization of access to data? Owner. Give you a very simple example. I'm head of the sales department. Below me, there are 4 salesmen, say A, B, C, D. I, as the owner, will decide that A will have access data relating to East, B will have access data relating to West, C will have access to data relating to North, and so on. So how do we ensure there is adequate segregation of duties in the organization? Through authorization of access to data. Who is authorized to give authorization of access to data? Owner, because owner is accountable. Please remember 2-3 questions which we have discussed. COSO is the internal control framework. Now you can easily find out what is there in the framework. So for each business organization, we need to develop a control environment. And once you are developing the control environment, we also need to understand what kind of risks are there. Third is control activities. To bring down the level of risk to the residual risk level, implement controls. And then information and communication. This is management reporting. Last is monitoring. Always remember one thing. Risk assessment is a dynamic exercise. It's never a static exercise. Because of change in risk factors, we have to continuously do this risk assessment. Maybe more threats are developed over a period of time. So risk monitoring means because of change in risk factors, today there may not be a problem, but because of development in future, this problem may come up. So because of change in risk factors, you have to continuously monitor the level of risk. Maybe more threats are developed over a period of time, and I'm not adequately protected against them. Top one. COSO says there are 3, why should I have internal controls? COSO says there are 3 objectives of internal controls: operations, reporting, compliance. Operations, how effective are my operations? Under reporting, you will see 2 types of reporting: external financial reporting and external non-financial reporting. External financial reporting, your balance sheets, profit and loss count. Non-financial, internal processes. Third is compliance. This compliance, you are already aware. And we need to, this third dimension, where you can see my cursor, it says we need to provide internal controls at different levels of the organization, at entity level, division level, operating unit, function level. COVID 5. So what I will do is, I'll take you to the diagram also and explain through the diagram. Anyways, first of all, COVID 5. Again, this is a framework. As I've told you, whenever I study any framework, first of all, I try to find out this framework relates to what, so that I'm able to relate to it. COVID 5 issued by ISACA is the business framework of governance and management of enterprise IT. COVID 5 issued by ISACA is the business framework of governance and management of enterprise IT. In simple terminology, what is COVID 5 relating to? How IT should be governed, how IT should be managed, so that I get the maximum benefit of IT for my business process. This is what COVID 5 relates to. How to get the maximum. See, today, if you see, when you talk about business processes, basically we are speaking only about IT processes only. Such is the importance and criticality of IT today. So when you talk about any business process, basically we are referring to IT process. Such is the importance and criticality of IT today. So COVID 5, in common language, what is COVID 5 relating to? This framework relates to what? How IT should be governed, how IT should be managed, so that I get the maximum benefit of IT for my business process. So COVID 5 issued by ISACA, this you need to remember. COVID 5 issued by ISACA is the business framework of governance and management of enterprise IT. So what I will do is I'll take you to one diagram, and through the diagram I'll explain. I hope this starts quickly, because in Zoom things move a bit slowly as far as presentation is concerned. I hope and wish this starts immediately. I'm looking at my watch. Also, be prepared for extension of the class. So don't tell me, sir, 3 o'clock we will end the class. No. Let us understand certain points from me. Please use my time, use your time also. So at the end of the day, not only need to understand the concepts, but how to answer the question. Till the time there is conceptual clarity is there, you will not be able to answer the questions. So that conceptual clarity has to be there. But there's a diagram, you can download this diagram. I don't think it has appeared as yet. Yeah. It's much easier to explain through the diagram. It is now there in the module, but you can easily download it. Those who have attended my classes in physical form, maybe they must be having this diagram with them. Anyways, in COVID 5, there are 5 domains. Now I'll be slightly faster on this because this is only revision only. But I'll give you the gist. So in COVID 5, there are 5 domains. In COVID 5, there are 5 domains. One governance domain. Now look at my cursor, which is moving horizontally. EDM 01, EDM 02, EDM 03, EDM 04, EDM 05. This is one governance domain. There are 5 domains. One governance domain and 4 management domains. And what are those 4 management domains? I think all of you must be aware of this. What are those 4 management domains? Align, plan and organize, build, acquire and implement, deliver service and support, and last is monitor, evaluate and assess. So there are 5 domains in COVID 5. One governance domain, EDM 01, EDM 02, EDM 03, EDM 03, EDM 04, EDM 05. Now after that, something is written in words also. I've not spoken about the words, but moving horizontally, this is one governance domain. And there are 4 management domains: align, plan and organize, build, acquire and implement, deliver service and support, monitor, evaluate and assess. So there are 5 domains. Now, in COVID 5, there are 5 governance processes. These are the finer points which we need to remember. I think all of you should be aware of this. It's just a revision. So there are 5 governance processes. EDM 01, ensure governance framework setting and maintenance. EDM 02, ensure benefit delivery. EDM 03, ensure risk optimization. EDM 04, ensure resource optimization. And EDM 05, ensure stakeholder transparency. These are 5 governance processes. Under align, plan and organize, there are 13 processes. You can see the numbering here. I'll just increase the size further. Starting from APU 01, APU is short form. Align, plan and organize is the fullest form. So in align, plan and organize, you can see there are 13 processes. Numbering is there starting from 01 till 13. Build, acquire and implement, there are 10 processes. BAI, starting from BAI 01 till BAI 10. Delivered service support, there are 6 processes. You can see my cursor moving. And monitor, evaluate, assess, there are 3 processes. If it is asked to us how many management processes are there in COVID 5, not COVID 2019, COVID 5. How many management processes are there? My answer will be 32. Now, how I calculated this figure of 32? Align, plan and organize, 13 processes. Build, acquire, implement, 10 processes, 13 plus 10, 23. Deliver service support, 6 processes, 23 plus 6, 29. And 29 plus 3, under monitor, evaluate, assess, we have 3 processes, 29 plus 3, 32. Remember, in COVID 5, there are 5 domains, 1 governance domain, 4 management domain. What are those 4 management domains? Align, plan and organize, build, acquire and implement, deliver service support, monitor, evaluate and assess. And there are 37 processes. Read the question very carefully. How many governance processes are there in COVID 5? 5. How many management processes are there in COVID 5? 32. How many total processes, governance and management processes are there in COVID 5? 37. 5 governance and 32 management. Something more important. Each governance process, you can read this word ensure. This you can download also from the web. It is free of cost. It's available in the public domain. This diagram I'm talking about, you can download it. With each governance process, you can read this word ensure, and with each management process, except these three processes, ME01, ME02, ME03, you will read this word manage. ME01, ME02, ME03 is basically monitoring, evaluation of your performance. Otherwise, with each governance process, you can read this word ensure. This is very logical. And with each management process, you can read this word manage, except these three processes. ME01, ME02, ME03, because this is reporting, evaluation and reporting. Governing why this word ensure is there. Directions. You want to see what is the ultimate objective of this 37 processes. The ultimate objective of these 37 processes in COVID-5 is you want to meet your enterprise objectives, go in for these objectives. Remember, COVID-5 is a generic framework, meaning thereby a particular objective, a particular process is not applicable in your case, they say leave it. You want to modify it, modify it. It's on you. It's a generic framework. What they have tried to do under COVID-5, there are two important terms. We say COVID-5 is the umbrella framework. Look at my hands. Umbrella framework. Overarching framework. Meaning that by under COVID-5, they have tried to cover the organization from all angles, all perspectives. But at the end of the day, this is a generic framework. ISACA itself says it's a generic framework. So it is modifiable. Particular process not applicable, leave it. You want to modify it, modify it. You want to use it in the same form, use it. And what they have done is they have issued one Excel sheet also. In the framework, that also you can download. It is free of cost, and much more material is available free of cost. There is one Excel sheet which ISACA has issued, where with each process they have defined practices. This can be asked to us. With each process, they have defined practices. With each practice, they have defined activities. What is activity? What needs to be done? And once you start reading those activities, you will find no rocket science. This is generally what we do. What they have done in COVID-5 is they have assimilated all the relevant points at one place in a wonderful manner. So it makes more sense. So coming back to this, whenever you see any governance process, you read this word ensure, because this is the role of the board of directors. Governance, who is doing governance? Board of directors. So they have to ensure directions. And whenever you see this management process, you read the word manage. This has to be executed, managed. And these objectives, have you understood? So governance, why this word ensure is there? Directions. And why this word manage is there with management process? Management body has to execute. And ME01, ME02, ME03 is evaluation. That is why you're not seeing manage word here. It's evaluation of the performance. Monitor, evaluate, and assess. And with each governance objective, with each governance process, not objective, with each governance process, you will read this word EDM. EDM 01, EDM 02, EDM 03, EDM 04, EDM 05. Why this word EDM? What is the full form of EDM? First of all, evaluate, direct, monitor. Now, why this word EDM is there? Because the board of directors, they have to evaluate, direct, and monitor the effective use of IT for meeting business objectives. The simplest of all the definitions I've given you. Why this word EDM is there? Whenever you see any governance process, 5 governance process, you will read this word EDM. You can check. Full form of EDM, evaluate, direct, and monitor. Why this word EDM is there? Because the board of directors, they have to evaluate, direct, and monitor the effective use of IT for meeting enterprise objectives. That is why this word EDM is there. EDM is basically 3 practices of governance. Few minutes back, I told you there are 3 objectives of governance: benefit realization, risk optimization, resource optimization. EDM is basically 3 practices of governance. Three practices of governance: evaluate, direct, and monitor. Ensure that objectives and practices, they do not get mixed up. Please ensure this. EDM is three practices of governance. Remember this. Another question: do I need to remember all the 37 processes? Okay, if you want to. But in module 3, we have described 3 processes. One is EDM 03, one is APO 12, and one is ME 03. At least these 3 you must go through. And you need to remember both EDM 03, ensure risk optimization, both EDM 03 number as well as ensure risk optimization. APO 12 as well as manage risk. You will see this. You can see my cursor. And ME 03, monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. And from the name itself, you can find out what is there in the process. They're so logically named. Ensure risk optimization. You want to optimize the risk? This has to be ensured by the governing body. I'm just giving the gist of this. From the name itself, you can find out. And the moment you read this word ensure, it's a governance process. The moment you read this word manage, it's a management process. APO 12, manage risk. From the name itself, see these processes are very logically named. From the name itself, you can find out. Manage risk, you have to manage the risk. Who has to manage? Executive body. ME 03, monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. What would be there in this process? Monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. You want to meet your external requirements. From the name itself, you can find out what is there. They're logically named. They're not randomly named. These processes I'm talking about, 37 processes are very logically named. Read the name, you are able to find out. Remember this clue I'm giving you. Whenever you read this word ensure, it will be a governance process. And management process. I'll come back to my PowerPoint. Just a minute, let me switch off my mobile here. This keep just forgot to switch it off now. Switch it off. Anyways, I was on this slide. Now take it. 2 points I'm going to cover come what may in chapter 5, which are one of the favorite areas of the examiner. I don't know what is going. Rest you can go through. There are 5 enablers. There are 5 principles and 7 enablers. You can go through it. Major part, these are the 5 principles which we follow. Meeting stakeholder needs. This is basic definition of governance only. Covering the enterprise end to end, inclusive of everything and everyone. This term you will read here. Covering the enterprise from end to end. Applying a single integrated framework. Before COVID 5 was there were many professional bodies which had come out with the guidance. COVID 5 is a single framework which is giving you guidance. Enabling a holistic approach, all interacting and interrelated components, they need to be integrated. Let me give you a gist of this difference between point 2 and point 4, that is covering the enterprise end to end. Look at my hands. Covering the enterprise from end to end. Point number 2, second principle. Fourth principle, enabling a holistic approach. Now you go within the organization. All interacting and interrelated components should also be integrated. This is the difference between 2 and 4. I'll give you a very simple example. I've done the computerization of the entire enterprise, covering the enterprise end to end. Now in the enterprise, we have so many departments, like accounts department. One part of account department is inventory. Enabling a holistic approach means I've covered the entire enterprise. Now one particular department could be accounts department, and one part of account department could be sub-part of accounts department could be inventory. Enabling holistic approach means moment my item reaches a reorder level, automatically a PO should be generated so that there is no shortage of raw material. Because even if one of the sub-components is going to suffer, it will have impact on the component. Component is suffering, it will have impact on the process. Process is suffering, it will have impact on the entire organization. Fifth is very important. We need to separate governance from management. Remember, governance is the role of the board of directors under the leadership of the chairperson. Management is the role of the executive management under the leadership of CEO. Governance, directions, management, execution. So governance is the role of the board of directors under the leadership of the chairperson, that is the chairman. Governance is the role of the board of directors under the leadership of the chairman, and management is the role of the executive management under the leadership of CEO. And now this is what we have covered. These are the three practices. Now there are certain ISOs mentioned here. ISO 38500. ISO 38500 is the ISO standard for corporate governance of IT. You can go through it. 31000 is also mentioned. It's on enterprise risk management. Yeah. Let me discuss certain key terms with you here. Risk management in COVID-5. This is EDM 03. Need to remember both EDM 03 as well as ensure risk optimization. And the moment you read this word ensure, immediately it should strike. It's a governance process. And from the name itself, you can find out ensure risk optimization. You want to optimize your risk, your IT risk. And these are three practices: evaluate, direct, and monitor. This I have already explained to you through the diagram. These are 6 practices of APO 12 manage risk. These are there in the module. You can go through it. What is a metric? Metric is a benchmark. With each process, they say we should have a metric also, a benchmark also. Yeah, simple terms we have used. Okay. One slide I will discuss with you. Yeah. There are 4 risk management strategies. These are not 5, these are 4. Accept, transfer, wide, and mitigate. Quickly, I'll go through it. These are 4. Transfer, oblique, share is same. Accept. When we accept the risk, these are 4 risk management strategies. So once you have done the risk assessment, we need to manage the risk also. There are 4 strategies. Accept. When we accept the risk, when the cost of the control is much more compared to the value of the asset being protected, or once the threat probability is removed, we accept the risk. Transfer, oblique, share, same. Transfer, insurance, share, outsourcing, avoid. A particular risk may be linked to a particular vendor, technology, supplier. Example could be, I have purchased a payroll software from a particular vendor. Now, whenever I key in the data into my wages, payroll, PF calculation is wrong. Because there's a problem in the software itself, and manually I have to do the corrections. And every possibility I may miss some of the corrections. So avoid means a particular risk may be linked to a particular vendor, technology, supplier. And how we avoid this risk? By shifting to another supplier, a better product, a robust product. Mitigate, implementation of controls. Remember, risk mitigation is also called as risk treatment. So there are 4 strategies. In your module, you will see one more term here. That is turn back. Turn back is basically nothing but your acceptance only. It is acceptance only. When we accept the risk, when the cost of the control is much more compared to the value of the asset being protected, or once the threat probability is remote. So there are 4 strategies when you talk about risk management. Accept, transfer, wide, and mitigate. This is important. Risk register and control catalog. Risk register control catalog is nothing but your RCM. Risk control matrix. It's RCM only. Risk control matrix in the form of Excel sheet. We define what risk, what controls. So risk register, from the name itself, we can find out it's a collective record of all identified and evaluated risk, along with risk owner and risk response. And control catalog. It's a collective register of all the controls that are designed and implemented to bring down the level of risk to the residual risk level. So risk register is a collective record of all identified and evaluated risk, along with risk owner and risk response. Owner and custodian differentiation I've already explained to you. Control catalog is a collective register of all the controls that are designed and implemented with reference to risk register. Very important terms. Risk appetite and risk tolerance. I'll give you some key terms here. How do we find out, or how we differentiate between risk appetite and risk tolerance? First definition. The ability of an organization to sustain losses. We're talking about risk appetite. It also represents the ability of an organization to take risk while considering new business initiatives. Remember, see my cursor. Risk appetite. Keyword is ability. Risk tolerance. The limit to which an organization can sustain loss of business in case risk materializes. Keyword is limit. Risk appetite, keyword ability. Risk tolerance, keyword limit. See, risk appetite is a broader term, and within that, tolerance is a narrower term. If I'm not able to pinpoint any limit, there is uncertainty, a very important term which I'm using now. Uncertainty, what is there? It goes to appetite. The moment you see this word uncertainty is there, it has to be appetite. You're not sure. So three keywords I will say. Ability, it goes to appetite, tolerance, limit. And another key term which I've given you is uncertainty. I'll give you a very simple example. In the stakeholder meeting, stakeholders say we will not take a risk that can result in a major loss of revenue from our present customers. They do not specify any limit. It goes to appetite. There is uncertainty. Same example I can modify like this. In the stakeholders meeting, stakeholders say we will not take a risk that can result in a loss of revenue from our top 10 customers to decline by more than 10%. There is some certainty. It goes to tolerance. So tolerance is working within that appetite itself. Or in other words, appetite is a broader term, whereas tolerance is a narrower term. So key terms I've given you. Please remember those key terms. This is important. Risk evaluation. There are two techniques. This is important. Risk identification, you can go through it. Risk evaluation, there are two techniques: quantitative risk analysis and qualitative risk analysis. Quantitative risk analysis means expressing the total risk in monetary terms, and qualitative with qualification, like high, medium, low. But your perception may change, my perception may change. We need to define what we mean by high, medium, low. So there are two techniques of risk evaluation: quantitative risk analysis, expressing the total risk in monetary terms, and qualitative with qualification like high, medium, low. Okay? And normally what technique we follow? Qualitative, high, medium, low, because we do not have that kind of historical data to quantify that in monetary terms. So there are two techniques: quantitative, monetary terms; qualitative with qualification. Risk response, I've already told you: 4, avoid, transfer, accept, and mitigate. Risk mitigation is risk treatment. Risk monitoring, because of change in risk factors. This is a very important point. Because of change in risk factors, we have to continuously monitor the level of risk. Maybe more threats are developed over a period of time, and I'm not adequately protected. Inherent risk. This is a very important definition given in your module also. Total risk without any controls. One-liner definition is there: inherent risk. Total risk without any controls. Remember this definition. Total risk without any controls. Residual risk, implement controls. Whatever is the remaining risk is called as residual risk. So residual risk is the remaining risk which remains in the organization once we have implemented controls. We cannot go to zero scenario. Some risk will always be there. So that is residual risk. Risk profile. What is risk profile? Again, definition is very important. Collective view of all risk an organization likely to face. These are important definitions, my dear friends. When the question paper is definition based, you do not have any option. Definitions are very specific. Risk profile is important definition. Collective view of all risk an organization likely to face. Sitting around the table, we are discussing what kind of risk could take place. And when you document that, it goes to risk register. Risk register. Recall the definition: collective record of all identified and evaluated risk. Risk profile: collective view of all risk an organization likely to face. I'm going as per the definition given in the module itself. Another important term: heat map. This is a very important term. Remember this definition. It's a graphical representation of risk profile. Heat map, graphical representation of risk profile. Okay, we learned the definition, but what could be the purpose of this heat map? See, my people at the top level, they will not be able to understand what we mean by risk profile. So in the form of bar chart, I give a presentation. It makes more sense. Important term, heat map, graphical representation of a risk profile. And I've told you I'll be discussing certain important terms with you. This we have already discussed. Response, already discussed with you. 4. See, seriality could change, but they remain 4. Avoid, accept, transfer, share, mitigate. Risk monitoring because of change in risk factors. Number of times I've spoken this term, this line. Because of change in risk factors, we have to continuously monitor the level of risk. The risk assessment is not a static exercise, it's a dynamic exercise. Just one topic I will take from chapter 3, just 2 minutes on that. That is ME03. ME03, monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. This is important. Now, from the name itself, I can find out what could be there in ME03. See, what is the process? Monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. Now, from the name itself, I can find out. What is the objective of this process? Objective is that the organization is compliant with all external requirements. The organization is compliant with legal obligations, contractual requirements. It is compliant. And just what I have told you, with each process, they have defined practices. With each in COVID-5, with each process, they have defined practices. With each practice, they have defined activities. What needs to be done? Well, it's taking a long time now. I don't know why it is taking such a time. Yeah, slowly it is opening up. But I've already discussed with you. This is an important point in chapter 3. Name the process which ensures compliance with external requirements. This is my question. Name the process that ensures compliance with external requirements in COVID-5. And in the option I've given ME03. I'm not mentioning compliance with external requirements. I'm mentioning ME03. See, if I mention compliance with external requirements, you're able to find out from the name itself. But if I mention ME03, then things become slightly tougher. So what I'm trying to tell you, these 3 processes, EDM03, ensure risk optimization, APO12, manage risk, and ME03, monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. Remember the number also, that is ME03, EDM03, APO12. These only 3 processes I've told you. This is there in your module also. These 3 processes are there. They are discussed in your module. I know I was told to end the class by 3:20. So we have wasted around 5 minutes when I did not share my screen and started off. Yeah, this one I was talking about. ME03, monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. And with each process, they have defined practices. In COVID-5, with each practice, they define activities. These are the 4 practices of ME03. This could be asked. Name the process that ensures compliance with external requirements. And in the option, I've given ME03. I do not mention this monitor, evaluate, assess compliance with external requirements. Remember these key terms: ensure, manage, 5 domains. 5 governance process, 32 management process. Total process, how many? In COVID-5, 37. 5 governance and 32 management. I'll move on to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is very longish. So what I will do is, I'll just give you the gist of that. Quickly go through some key terms. Nishi, is there any problem here if I extend? Nishi, are you there? Anybody there from? Can I extend the class? There is no issue. So how much more time I have? Give me 2 hours more, then I'll continue for 2 more hours. Anyways, I'll continue with it. Let me cover some of the important terms. But my voice is clear, vision is clear, and audio is clear. There is no issue there. No issue. At least they should be. I should be audible. At least not visible. Anyways, key enablers of GEIT. Of course, the entire chapter is quite long, but I'll give you the gist of this. Then only 2 topics in chapter 5. First, definition of enabler. Enabler, how we define enabler. Enabler is any capability, any force, any resource which helps me meet my objectives. Enterprise objectives, of course. So enabler we define as any capability, any force, any resource which helps me in meeting my objectives, my enterprise objectives. But there are 7 enablers. This is the first one. There are 7 enablers. Principle, policies, and framework. Remember this key term, non-intrusive. This is a characteristic of good policy. It's a very important term. This is the characteristic of good policy. Non-intrusive. What is non-intrusive? It should make sense. It should be clear. It should be logical as what we want. It's a very important term. It's a characteristic of a good policy. In the option I give, non-intrusive. Yes. And remember, principles are always limited in number, whereas policies are more detailed guidance. Second point I'm telling you. Under principles, policies, and framework. Second important point. Principles are limited in number, whereas policies are more detailed guidance as to how to put principles into practice. I'll give you a very simple example to understand. In my organization, principle is whatever software we use should correspond to high quality standard. Whatever software we use should correspond to high quality standard. Just one line of principle is there. Now my policy is, should a running software needs a modification? Should a running software needs a modification? First of all, it must be approved by the IS management, that is the top management and the end user. Once you obtain the consent of the IS management, that is the top management and the end user, then the programmer in the development environment, not production environment. Programming is not done in production environment, development environment. So under development environment, the programmer will modify the program. Once the program is modified, straight away it will not be launched in the live environment. Next step is the quality control manager, mentioned in your module also. It will implement quality control procedures such as checking the software and its life process of free from defects. And it meets the needs, requirement, and expectation of the end user. Then security people will check whether security packs like password security is defined. And then at the end, I will take end user sign off. What is end user sign off? User should give the consent. Yes, after modification, it is meeting my requirement. Only then it should be launched in the live environment. You know from where we started? Principles are limited in number, policies are more detailed. Second point, which is important. So 2 terms I have discussed. One is characteristic of good policy. It should be non-intrusive, clear, logical. It should make sense. Second point I have covered under principle, policies, and framework. That is the first enabler. Principles are limited in number, policies are more detailed guidance. And remember, all these 7 enablers are interacting with each other. They are communicating with each other. They are not working in isolation of each other. There are seven enablers: principles, policies, framework, processes, organizational structures, culture, ethics, and behavior, information, services, infrastructure, and applications, people, skills, and competencies. And all these 7 enablers are interlinked. They are interacting with each other. They are not working in isolation of each other. Take for example, you want to provide information. For that, I require services, infrastructure. The type of information that is generated will depend upon people, skills, and competencies. Who is authorized to do what will be decided by the organizational structures. What processes we are following in the organization for generating information. So they are all interlinked. These 7 enablers. They are not working in isolation of each other. Okay. This I've already explained to you. Links and relationships. Processes. Definition is very important. A process is a collection of practices influenced by enterprise policies and procedures that take inputs from a number of sources, manipulates the inputs and produces output. Definition. Simplest definition of process: input, process, output. You need to remember this. You're already aware of it. What is the definition of process? Input, process, output. And this is what I've told you. Remember, this can be asked to us. With each process, there are practices. With each practice, there are activities. What is activity? What needs to be done? One more important term I will discuss under processes. This I've already discussed with you. That is RACI chart. Yeah, this one. Can you see my cursor? RACI chart. They say with each practice we need to have a RACI chart or a RACI chart, you can say. Full forms are mentioned here. R, responsible, A, accountable, C, consultant, I, informed. They say with each practice we need to have a RACI chart. Who is responsible for this practice? Whose accountability will be fixed? In case objective of this practice is not taken care of, with whom I can consult? I'm not able to solve the problem, with whom I can consult? Who's to be reported to? Informed. They say with each process, with each practice we need to have a RACI chart. Who's responsible for this practice? Who's accountable for this practice? With whom I can consult if I'm not able to solve the problem? Who's to be reported to? Informed. It's an important term. RACI chart or RACI chart, you can say. RACI chart. This is general management. What could be the purpose of organizational structures? Now, under these organizational structures, strategy committee and steering committee are mentioned, which I've already explained to you. Please go through in detail in your module. Also, it is mentioned. Just have given you. Both are very important. Strategy committee, monitoring committee, steering committee is into implementation, deployment of IT. Now, this is nothing new. This is part of the organizational structure itself. Now I've gone into the IT department. This is nothing new. This is part of the organizational structure itself. Now I've gone into the IT department. Now you will see role of different persons here. You can go through it. This is part of organizational structure itself. Now I've gone into the IT department. Different persons are mentioned here. Need to remember their roles. Risk and controls more or less are same in all the cases. What is different is the rules. Remember, there are certain rules which we follow while designing the organization structure. First, maker should not be checker. Yes, maker should not be checker. And all operations and programming functions should always be separated. Of course, there are other rules also, but we need to remember these two golden rules. Need to remember these two golden rules. Maker should not be checker while designing your organization structure. Maker should not be checker, and all operations and programming functions should always be separated. So there are different people who are mentioned, the role of different persons are mentioned in the IT department. You can go through it. Risk and controls more or less are same. I will draw your attention to one control which is very, very important. This one. Whenever you talk about any control, this is the most important part. Need to know, need to do basis. This is one of the best controls we have. Need to know, need to do basis. And what we mean by this, if required, we'll give you information. If not required, we will not give you information. This is a very good control. Need to know, need to do basis. So if required, we'll give you information. If not required, we'll not give you information. So now you can go through the roles of different persons which are mentioned here in chapter 4. So risk and controls more or less are same in all the cases. One line I was mentioning while deliberating, I'll show you that line which is there in your module also. I'll show you that line. So golden rules I've told you, maker should not be checker, operations and programming functions should always be separated. Now read this one. Last line, all operations and programming functions should always be separated. Keep in mind these two rules, at least these two rules are very important ones. Maker checker, maker should not be checker, and all operations, the last line here on this slide, all operations and programming functions should always be separated. But please go through the rules, roles of these persons. Risk and control more or less are same in all the cases. Difference is roles. Culture, ethics, and behavior. Two important terms you will see here. One is the tone from the top. The tone from the top means messages spoken, and then spoken from top will set the example. And one is walk the talk. The tone from the top means messages spoken and unspoken from top will set the example. You have to give. So you have to set an example. So what are the messages which are coming from top level? They're following good culture and behavior. People down the line will also follow the same. And another important term under this is culture, ethics, and behavior is walk the talk. What is walk the talk? What I preach, I follow. What I preach, I follow also. Information you can go through it. These are very simple terminologies used. Whatever information is there, it should be relevant, complete, appropriate, concise. This you can go through. Nothing much. People skills and competency I've already explained to you while discussing resource optimization. Remember, I told you there are three objectives of governance: benefit realization, risk optimization, resource optimization. And how do we optimize human resources? Through training, through skill development programs, leadership development programs, career progression, job retention, job rotation. Now I'll come to the last chapter. Sixth chapter is more or less repetition of what you have done in first 5 chapters. So basically, I'll spend time in chapter 5. Very simple topics are left, which I will be discussing with you. And you can definitely expect questions from here. I mean, all the expectation is there, but very simple topics are there. Now, before this opens up, let me start my deliberation. It's on performance management system. I want to manage my performance. Now, there are two, this is chapter 5 now. Now, there are two approaches of performance management. One is proactive, one is reactive. There are two approaches of performance management. Proactive means as I'm performing, I'm measuring my performance using lead indicators. Reactive means once the event is over, we measure our performance using lag indicators. See, we need to understand the difference between lead and lag indicator. There are two approaches for performance measurement. After that, I'll cover only balance scorecard, that's all. So there are two approaches of performance measurement. One is proactive, one is reactive. Proactive means as I'm performing, I'm measuring my performance using lead indicators. Look at my cursor. Reactive means once the event is over, we measure our performance using lag indicators. We need to understand the difference between the two, lead and lag indicator. Remember, lag indicators are very easy to find out. Lead indicators slightly trickier. Whenever you get a question on this lead and lag indicator, either eliminate 3 lag and get the right answer, or straight away find out the lead. So there are two approaches: proactive, lead indicator; reactive, once the event is over, we measure the performance using lag indicator. I'll give you examples to understand the difference between lead and lag indicator. After 31st March, I make my balance sheet and profit and loss count. Event is over. Whatever results we obtain, lag indicator. After 31st March, I conduct my statutory branch audit. Event is over. Example of lag indicator. So after 31st March, you make your balance sheet, profit and loss count, lag indicator. After 31st March, I conduct my statutory branch audit, again lag indicator. Concurrent audit that you do is an example of lead indicator, side by side. See, what is important to differentiate, and how do I differentiate between lead and lag? Timing is very important. At what point of time you are measuring the performance? Timing is the essence here. We take more examples. I'm running a resort. A family has stayed in my resort. Now they have gone back to their hometown. Now I write a mail to them seeking their feedback. Family has already left my resort and they have gone back to their hometown. So whatever feedback I get, it becomes lag indicator. They have already left. Now see how I can convert this into a lead also. Family is going to stay with us for 2 nights. First night when the family was having dinner, I approached them. They will be staying with us for 1 more night also. First night when the family is having dinner, I approach them, seeking their feedback. This is the feedback which I get, sir. Ambience is good, rooms are good, service is good, quality of the food is there, is very good. But temperature near the front desk, that is the reception, it needs to be improved. It is hot there. See, the moment I go to any resort or any hotel, first of all, I go to the front desk, that is the reception. And if I find temperature there is also not good, I will say, what is the use? I'm based at a place like Delhi. And all the way from Delhi, in the month of June, I drive from Delhi to resort. And I find the temperature, it's pretty hot in Delhi in the month of June. And all the way I drive down to resort and find temperature there is also not good. What is going to be my reaction? What is the use of coming to this place? Temperature also here also is not good. Moment I get this kind of a feedback, I tell my service engineer, call up my service engineer, tell him, stop 40 ton AC plant, start 50 ton AC plant. Lead indicator. Family to stay with us for more night. Timing is the essence. At what point of time you are measuring the performance? I'll take more example to explain this concept. I'm selling a product. There are other competitors also who are selling same type of product. In the same time, they are my competitors. I say, let us get one survey done. As what is our market survey? What is our market share today? Let us get one survey done. Whatever results we obtain, lag indicator. Why? Because once my competitor will also reveal the results, only then I'm able to find out what is my market share. Lag indicator. Event is over. See how I can convert this into a lead also. Yes. I'm thinking in terms of introducing a new product. I've not manufactured the product. I'm thinking in terms of introducing a new product. So I say, let us get one survey done. I have not manufactured the product. I'm thinking in terms of introducing a new product. And before introducing the new product, my intention is let us get one survey done as to what is the acceptability of the product in the market. Whatever result you obtain, lead indicator. I'll give you more example to understand. Under normal circumstances, I'm based at Delhi. So under normal circumstances, movies are released on Friday for public viewing. Not during pandemic. I'm not talking about pandemic, but under normal circumstances. Movies are released on Friday for public viewing. So before releasing the movie for public viewing on Friday, what we do is we arrange special show for the critics on Thursday night or Thursday evening, I'll say. On Thursday evening, we arrange a special show for the critics. Critics see the movie. They write their comments. Their comments will appear in the newspaper on Friday morning. From critics' point of view, this becomes a lag indicator. I'm reading the newspaper on Friday morning and making up my mind whether to see the movie or not. For me, this becomes lead indicator. Timing is the crux. I'll give you one more example. I'm maintaining system within 48 hours will recover these 5 processes if ever they are disrupted. So these 5 processes are disrupted at my client place only after. So whatever result we obtain after the 48 hours have passed, elapsed, the hours period is passed, it becomes a lag indicator. Now how I can convert this into lead? Moment my client calls me up, within the next 4 hours, we deploy 2 processes at my client place. Within the next 3 hours, they recover 2 processes. Right now, 48 hours have not passed. Within that time duration itself, we are able to recover some processes. This becomes an example of lead indicator. So lag indicator.
Recording in progress.
Importance is at what point of time your performance. I hope this is clear to us. And from my side, I'll tell you, it's very easy to find out lag indicator. Slightly tougher to find out lead indicator. Whenever you get a question on lead and lag indicator, either eliminate the 3 lag and get the right answer, or straight away find out the lead. Concept should be clear to us. Timing is very important here. At what point of time you are measuring the performance? Event is over, you are measuring the performance lag. Within that duration itself, lead. So there are two approaches for performance measurement. One is proactive, where you read lead indicator, and one is reactive, where you read lag indicator. And then we have two types of goals. Nothing new here. Goal setting is the first prerequisite for performance management. Goal setting can be done at the top level, it could be done at the bottom level, it could be a combination of two. Now there are two types of goals for performance measurement. One is outcome. Under outcome, you will read KGI or key goal indicators using lag indicator. Nothing new here. Still lead and lag only. And under performance, you will read KPI or key performance indicators using lead indicators. So two approaches for performance measurement: proactive and reactive, and two goals: outcome, performance. I'll quickly roll on to the last topic for the day: balance scorecard. Very easy to understand. Very simple, but very important. Yes. Balance scorecard is defined by Robert S. Kaplan and David P. Norton. Groups objectives, measures, targets, initiatives into 4 perspectives: financial, customer, internal process, learning, and growth. With all of them, what perspective is there? Balance scorecard is defined by Robert S. Kaplan and David P. Norton. Group objectives, measures, targets, initiatives into 4 perspectives: financial perspective, customer perspective, internal process perspective, learning, and growth perspective. In common language, what is the balance scorecard? In common terminology, it's a performance management tool. In common terminology, balance scorecard is basically a performance measurement tool, which says once you are evaluating the performance of any organization, then you must look at the organization from 4 angles, 4 perspectives. Normally what we see, financial perspective, they say yes, this has to be taken care of, but apart from financial perspective, must take into consideration 3 more perspectives. That is your customer, internal process, learning, and growth. Only then you are able to find out how the organization has performed. So in a nutshell, it's a performance measurement tool which says once you are evaluating the performance of the organization, then you must look at the organization from 4 perspectives, 4 angles: financial, customer, internal process, learning, and growth. But please remember, at the end of the day, balance scorecard is the performance measurement tool. So I'll have to define my metrics. What is the metric? Benchmarks. Of course, before I start with this, whatever benchmark or metric we set should be achievable also. It should be achievable. Otherwise, instead of becoming a motivational factor, it will become a demotivational factor. Financial perspective. What could be financial perspective? Your financial statement, balance sheet, profit and loss count. What metrics we have defined? Profitability, revenue growth, economic value added. See, metric you will set. I have set a metric. In this year, we will earn a profit of 1 crore. Are we able to achieve it? Good sign. Not able to achieve it, I will say improvement is required. See, there is a very common saying. There is a very common saying. Anything which cannot be measured cannot be improved upon. Anything which cannot be measured cannot be improved upon. So what is financial perspective? Your financial statement, balance sheet, and profit and loss account. So what metrics we have defined? Profitability, revenue growth. See, metric you will set. I have set a metric. In this year, we'll earn a profit of 1 crore. It could be 1 crore, it could be 100 crore, it could be 10 lakhs. Metrics you will set. Of course, it should be achievable also. Then we measure the performance. I've set a metric. In this year, we'll say achieve a growth rate of 10%. Are we able to achieve it? It could be 10, it could be 12, it could be 7, it could be 8 also. Are we able to achieve it? Yes. If not able to achieve it, improvement is required. I will not say that sign. I will say improvement is required. They say you set a metric, achieve the metric, further improve it, go for perfection. Don't sit and relax once you have achieved one metric. Go for perfection. Improvement. Customer perspective. See, financial perspective, let me conclude this. Profitability, revenue growth, economic value added. When you are able to find out what profit we have earned, what is the growth rate after the event is over. So we say financial perspectives are classic lagging indicators. They're classic lagging indicators. Customer perspective. From the name itself, we can find out customer perspective defines the organization, customer, and the value proposition we offer them, whether in terms of low cost, high quality. Simple words. Customer perspective. What could be customer perspective? Is the customer satisfied with us or not? If not, the customer is not going to stick with us. What metrics we have defined? Customer satisfaction, customer loyalty. Share of wallet we have mentioned. What is wallet? Purse. From his purse, how much money I'll be able to retain or take out? Customer loyalty. Will the customer stick to us or not? And I've given you that example of resort. Same example I've converted from lag to lead. So that is why we say most customers' perspectives are lagging indicators of performance. Internal process perspective, simple words. Don't I need to improve my internal processes? If I am not going to improve my internal processes, the customer is not going to stick with us. So internal process perspective defines the organization, customer, and the value proposition we offer them, whether in terms of low cost, high quality. Or I need to improve my internal processes in simple words. I need to improve my internal process. See, delivering value to the customers involves mastering numerous internal processes, including product development, production, manufacturing, delivery, and service. Obviously, I need to improve my processes. Metrics we have defined, patent spending, I have defined a metric. Patent spending at the end of the year should be zero. One patent is spending, not a good sign. Ratio of new products to total products. Zero defects, good sign. Often defect, not a good sign. See, metrics you will define. They say on these lines it can be defined. On-time delivery is taking place, good sign, not taking place, not a good sign. So internal process perspective, delivering value to the customers involves mastering numerous internal processes, including product development, production, manufacturing, and delivery. Or in other words, I need to improve my internal processes. Stockouts, never stockout, good sign. Often stockout, not a good sign. On-time delivery is taking place, good sign. Not taking place, not a good sign. Last is learning and growth. You're talking about employee skills and information technology. Once you talk about employee skills under learning and growth perspective, what could be the metrics? Employee satisfaction. Employee satisfied becomes an asset for us. Not satisfied, it goes the other way around. Every year of service, I have set a metric. If an employee stays with us for more than 10 years, it's a good sign. It could be 10, it could be 10, it could be 5, it could be 20. Metric you will set. I have set a metric. If an employee stays with us for more than 10 years, it's a good sign. If not, then improvement is required. Absenteeism, person never takes a leave. Mandatory leave, of course, he or she takes. Because mandatory leave is not being taken, it's a dangerous sign. But apart from mandatory leave, employee loves coming to the organization. He loves the environment, atmosphere. Number of training hours. I've set a metric. Every year we'll provide training to the senior management for 15 hours. Are we providing them? If not, improvement is required. Number of cross-trained employees. So in a nutshell, Balance Scorecard is a performance measurement tool which says once you are measuring the performance of any organization, you must look at the organization from 4 angles, 4 perspectives. That is financial, customer, internal process, learning and growth. And best part of, this is something important I'm telling you, best part of Balance Scorecard is it is not taking into consideration financial performance indicators only. It is also taking into consideration non-financial performance indicators also. Yes, it is taking into consideration both financial as well as non-financial. Customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, these are all non-financial. It is taking into consideration both. And even though we say Balance Scorecard is a performance measurement tool, it's a strategic management tool. Where strategy is the driving force. It creates a strategy-focused organization. So Balance Scorecard is a performance measurement tool. Just to conclude, which says once you are evaluating the performance of the organization, then you must look at the organization from 4 angles: financial, customer, internal process, learning and growth. So that was all in this presentation. Chapter 6 is basically a repetition of all first 5 chapters only. I hope you have been able to revise something with me. So that was all in my presentation. We have already exceeded the time by 43 minutes, to be very exact. So there are 2 question banks also on the portal. I've seen there are 2 question banks on 80 mock test papers, and some review questions are also there. Please go through them. But I always maintain one thing. Go through the modules. go through the questions given at the end of each module. Try to understand the concept. Because a slight twist in the question changes the sense of the question. So conceptual clarity must be there. Once you are conceptually clear, this is the concept, then answering of the question becomes much more simpler. So go through the modules, go through the questions given at the end of each chapter. Question banks are also there on the portal itself. I've seen there are 2 question banks. One is your 80 mock test papers are there. Then one review is also there. Review of question answer section, review of question and answer is there. Manual is there. But understand the concept. Of course, you can go through the question answer, but still I will maintain conceptual clarity must be there. For that, go through the modules. And on top of that, I'll wish you all the best. Take care. I don't think I can take your questions here because my chat box is not functional here. I can only see 3 participants here. Anyways, quickly we have gone through the different concepts. Just done the revision of that. Yeah. So please go through the modules, understand the concepts, go through the question given at the end of each chapter. Do regular study. I know you all are very busy right now. I'm also SCA. I can understand we all are very busy right now. But then you must find some time. I wish you all the best. Not only for 80 exam, for any exam, for that matter, but for coming years also. Take care. God bless you all. All the best. Thank you, friends. With these words, I'll end the class.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Always welcome. If you want, I can spend more time here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, friends. Bye. Take care. Stay safe.